Week in Review that truly requires no introduction. The nation's students announced this week that they have reluctantly agreed to give the American education system yet another chance, saying they hope educators keep their promises of smaller class size, better school supplies, and intensified efforts to raise the country's international math ranking. The nation's students vowed to give the education system one more shot, despite claiming to have been burned many, many times in the past. In other news, a man overcomes alcoholism without the help of Jesus, and an outcast student and a lonely teacher have begun a somewhat endearing sexual relationship. And that was a free lesson in top-shelf journalism. For more news, videos, and reminders of your insignificance, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
Hey, it is Free Talk Live, and welcome to the live Saturday edition. That means we're here live as we are all 7 nights per week.
We'll do it live.
The phones are open. If you want to join the show, the number is 603-283-6160. You can bring up absolutely anything you want. Tonight, it's Ian,
Beagless Mountaineer,
and the Lord Reverend Dr. Captain Kickass.
All right, so we're going to go to your phone calls and thoughts. You can bring up anything you want. Coming up here, apparently some senators are taking aim. I don't know what that means. We're going to find out at El Salvador over their adoption of Bitcoin.
Got you in their sights.
This, by the way, as the Bitcoiners are down in Miami apparently this weekend.
All right, it's that weekend, isn't it?
Yep. Mark Warden, I spotted pictures of him. He went down there from Porcupine Real Estate. He's hanging out down there in Miami. So if you want to weigh in on whatever you want to talk about, you can here. And then, of course, later on tonight at 10:30 Eastern Time, there will be Beard Talk Live, online only, over at our video streaming platforms like Odyssey at watch.freetalklive.com. But, Captain, you and I had the same story here tonight. We always do our own show prep independently. And then,
Oregoniho?
And then...
or Idaho, Oregon?
Well, they haven't decided yet. But I think they're just going to stick with Idaho if they can pull this off, and that is the Greater Idaho Movement, as it has been called, which we've covered here.
I've had one of those after eating too many potatoes,
which we've covered here some number of times. Seems like it's relatively recent, but it's gotten a lot of headway. This is the concept.
Also, wait a minute. Greater Idaho Movement?
Yeah, as in they're making Idaho bigger.
Or are they making it greater? Like as in
Maybe.
more great than Great Britain, for example?
I guess it could be interpreted that way.
You know? We're not just Idaho. We're the Greater Idaho.
Yeah. It's essentially a not entirely secession movement, but kinda.
It's like a merger movement.
It's a redraw, essentially. They want to change the boundaries from where Idaho currently is and move the line west, essentially, and shrink Oregon down.
Take over a bunch of eastern Oregon, which more resembles when I was on the West Coast, like the coast itself, where the mountains start and then all the way to the ocean, is like one area, like culturally, meteorologically, right, weather-wise, that kind of thing. And then once you get east of the mountains, it's basically the Midwest until you get to, I don't know, like Pennsylvania or something, right? That whole stretch has like 4 seasons and all that stuff, whereas everything in the mountains, the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Seattle, Washington area, Tacoma, that kind of stuff, and then Western Oregon as well. I think they should just, like, Western Oregon and Eastern Washington should become one state, and then as this particular
Western Washington,
Western Oregon.
Okay, you said Eastern Washington.
Should merge and become one state, and then Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon should probably join Idaho as like Greater Idaho.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a movement to secede Eastern Washington as well. I just haven't heard about that.
Like even politically, those areas are divided like you wouldn't believe. You get on the east side of the mountains in either Washington or Oregon, and everybody's a little more righty, right, than they are on the western side of the mountains. So
I'm pretty sure I've heard of a movement to secede from the rest of Washington from the ones on the flat side of the mountains, because they're like, oh no, they're California over there. We are not California over here.
Yeah, and if that is a movement, I would love to hear what that one's called. But for now, we do know about the Greater Oregon movement, which again proposes to
Greater Idaho movement.
Greater Idaho, which proposes to move the border of Idaho to encompass roughly a dozen or so counties, and apparently they've now hit their 12th county, and that's the news of the day. These counties have been voting, so that's the thing.
Yeah.
This isn't just like some radical guys talking
it's
about.
Not just a proposal.
Yeah.
It's not a bunch of politicians getting together, or even one
They're not just
trying
holding meetings.
Right. Yeah.
So do you want to share your story, Captain? You have it from the Statesman.
Yeah, this is from IdahoStatesman.com. Greater Idaho movement claims 12th Oregon county to vote in favor of moving the state line. After Tuesday night's special election in Oregon, the long-shot Greater Idaho movement has claimed victory in 12 eastern Oregon counties, despite results not being finalized as of Wednesday morning. The movement's proposal calls for 14 full counties in eastern Oregon to move to Idaho, as well as the eastern side of a number of other counties in central Oregon. Wallowa County, located in the northeast corner of the state and bordering both Idaho and Washington state, voted on the ballot question requiring county commissioners to discuss the possibility of moving the Idaho-Oregon state line westward. As of 1 p.m. Boise time, May 17th, 3,421 people had voted on the measure, with 50.3% voting in favor.
It's a close one.
Of requiring discussions on moving the state border. The county has a population of 7,659, which is about 2% of the people of eastern Oregon, according to the Greater Idaho movement. Although ballots still need to be counted due to Oregon law allowing mail-in ballots to be received after Election Day if they were mailed on or before the Election Day, the Greater Idaho movement believes that the vote will swing in its favor. The final election results in favor of Greater Idaho ballot measures have always been 1 to 4 percentage points higher than the election night result, the movement stated in a news release.
That's after they do the mail-ins. Okay.
Yeah. So the Greater Idaho movement feels confident that the measure has won the Wallowa County election. And they have a little picture here of, how it's going to go down. And it looks like most of, I'll call it eastern Oregon is included.
Yeah, they've got a map over at greateridaho.org, which is the official site of this particular movement, that shows all of the counties that have already voted, this being the 12th county to vote. So there's another one coming up. Crook County is going to vote on this. And so far, it says here the average is 62% in favor. So this county you're talking about, Wallowa, is a little closer than most of the votes have been. And according to the updates that were posted to this article, as of May 18th, according to the clerk, the ballot measure was only ahead by 7 votes. So it is literally, neck and neck as far as this thing. Now, just to be clear, they are only voting that the county commissioners, or whatever they were called there, the selectmen, or whatever the term is, that they talk about it.
Yeah, they have a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's by no means any sort of binding, this is going to happen, but it is at least a vote, and that's a lot more than most secession movements can say they've ever had.
50%, people are thinking about it.
For sure.
Right? If you get 50% of even, I realize not everybody votes, right, as a non-voter, right?
Sure.
But in this type of a thing where you're just wanting to have the discussion, it must be on their minds, right? They must have some, benefit in their mind about what this is going to do for them.
And that's always the first part of these things, is just to get people thinking about the idea. Because even if you are someone who would absolutely love the idea, but if you've never thought of it, if it's never been brought up, then it's never going to happen.
Yep.
Right. You have to believe that it's possible, number one. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that don't believe that independence is possible. And part of the reason is because there's been a lot of propaganda over the years about how this is impossible, it can't happen, we decided that in the Civil War,
right.
We're going to get murdered if we try this again. And that is what a lot of people are having to deal with. There's also the fear about, well, what about Social Security, and what about the military? And there's a lot of, legitimate questions.
Whataboutism?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, objections that people have. And anytime you're doing a sales job, right, you have to know how to overcome objections. Yep. When you present the product, or the idea in this case, to potential buyers, There's going to be people who have objections, and you got to have the answers to those objections. So this is all a process. If you can persuade people that your answers are valid, then they're going to think about it. They may not convert on the spot.
Yep.
They may have to take the information home with them, ruminate on it. It may take months. It may take years. They may have to talk to more than one person. You may be just the first individual that has a conversation with them about independence.
Well, and I think that's what makes libertarian philosophy or anarchist philosophy easy, for me anyway, is because I didn't really have to learn anything, right? I just had to go, oh, there's some logic to this. Okay, well, let me apply it.
Yeah.
Oh, look, and there's the answer. Huh, weird. So, seriously, you don't, if you just look into libertarianism philosophy or anarchist philosophy, why the state is evil, right? Why it's a horrible idea to organize people using violence and coercion and force. The answers are forthcoming.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember anything. You don't have to become learned in a certain way. Or it's just it makes sense. It's logical. Now we just apply it, and now you have all your answers.
Yeah, it's not something like Marxist philosophy where you have to learn, this is the definition of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. No. The thing about liberty philosophy, it is always categorized by a loss of other ideas. You have these other ideas getting in the way of simple logic.
Yeah.
When you are a child, you will automatically think in relatively logical ways about physical reality. And then all of these ideas can get in and change that and keep you from thinking in logical ways and indoctrinate you.
Yep.
Now, when you lose that indoctrination, if, for example, you are fed this idea of the world is this way, and that relies on this verifiable fact, and you try to verify that fact, and it just ain't so now you have to sort of remake your world, which is, it's a very time and energy intensive process, and it's very risky, but if you have to, then you have to. Now, once you have to, your default setting, your childlike knowledge setting of physical reality and logic will start to kick in. And if you go from there, it always leads to liberty.
Yeah. And the weird thing is sometimes one of the knocks I hear about, libertarians as a group is that, they're totally nerdy and they come off as know-it-alls. And that's not true. Right? People might take it that way, but what libertarians are mostly is correct, right? Factually correct. I'm not even kidding.
I'm not a know-it-all. I'm correct.
Well, they're technically correct, which is the best kind of correct, right? To be technically correct.
I don't know, man. Libertarians are wrong about a lot of stuff.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
Look at them right now.
Absolutely.
Right now, there's a bunch of libertarians who should know better, who are completely falling for a bunch of politicians.
But
and it's gross.
compared to Republicans and Democrats, right? If you look at, what libertarians are saying, hey, in general, there are issues, of course, where everybody has their differences and stuff. But
when they stick to principles,
like the non-aggression principle, they come out technically correct. And that's what sort of annoys the rest of the world about libertarians is that, okay, here's a bunch of high IQ people who might not be the most socially functioning human beings on planet Earth, but they've done the thinking.
I want to go to the phones here. We'll come back to the story. In fact, I'm curious if your story from the Statesman actually interviews anybody from the greater Idaho movement, and if they have anything to say about this, because the numbers are interesting, but what are the reasons for this? I've got some here as well. But let's go to somebody that is a big fan of independence. He's Dave Ridley on the line here tonight. Now, Dave, you were on hold at the beginning of the show, so you didn't know we were going to talk about this topic. I don't know why you were calling in, but what's on your mind tonight?
Well, that's great about Idaho. But I wasn't going to talk about that. But it's interesting. We actually sort of have a greater New Hampshire movement. Also, if you remember, in 2003, a town in Vermont tried to secede to New Hampshire.
Yeah, Killington, Vermont. I don't know if I would call that a movement in that I haven't heard anything about it since 2003. So if you've gone 20 years without making any headlines, I don't know if you can really call that a movement. But it was an interesting story because if I recall correctly, Killington is landlocked. It is not a border town with New Hampshire. So the idea that it's a ski town, and they're sick and tired of all the Vermont taxes or regulations or whatever. And the ski town said, you know what, we'd like to vote to move to, become New Hampshire, like this little island of New Hampshire in the middle of Vermont, which would have been amazing if it happened. And I don't think it ever went to a vote. I think it was just, something people talked about. But it did make headlines, though.
Yeah, it went pretty far in their governmental system. I don't remember. The New Hampshire government got involved. I think the governor of New Hampshire supported it in some form or fashion. But anyway,
I suspect the government of Vermont did not support it. That was the end of it.
That's right. But guess what? No one shot anybody. There were not 750,000 people killed or anything like. You can have an Independence Drive, and everybody still gets along afterwards. But I was talking about something. Going to talk about something else.
Go ahead.
Over the years, I've had this, this kind of passion for, and I haven't really done enough with it, but I have this passion for, we really need to have somebody speak at PorcFest or at Liberty Forum who really, like, everybody does a double take, all the eyebrows go up and the government can't stand it, and the authoritarians are freaking out that we're having this person speaking. Originally I thought, well, we need a president, like a president of Estonia, like a country that is seceded or something like that, But anyway, we're getting closer. We have they have achieved for the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Apparently, a key member of the Kennedy clan is now on board with the Free State Project to some extent.
Well, I mean, this is the thing I was referring to earlier. There's a bunch of libertarians out there that are getting all excited about these politicians.
You mean Republicans?
No, not even Republicans. This guy's a Democrat in this particular case, but there are some that are getting excited about Republicans.
These libertarians are acting like Republicans and getting excited about this candidate.
How are they acting like Republicans if they're excited about a Democrat?
Republicans probably wouldn't be excited about RFK. He's a Democrat.
But because he supports the small, limited government.
No, he doesn't. No? That's the thing. That's what's going on here is these libertarians who should know better than to be under the spell of a politician who... Shouldn't libertarians know better than the average person that politicians are lying scum and you cannot believe a word that they say?
One would hope so.
Right. No, but apparently not.
Yeah,
all they have
how
to
dare
do,
these libertarians sacrifice their principles in order to not get blown up by a nuclear weapon? How dare they?
All they have to do is... These politicians just sing a little song that sounds a little bit libertarian on one issue, and these libertarians just start getting all hot and bothered. Oh, my God.
If that issue is avoiding nuclear war with Russia, then maybe it's worth it, Ian.
Oh, is that what his issue is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, because he's disarming people at PorcFest who want to come see him speak.
Okay.
So stop telling me that the guy is a libertarian.
Okay, that is not what he's doing. He's not allowing them to be armed at his event.
Okay.
At PorcFest.
He's disarming anyone that wants to come
you can't be armed at PorcFest, which is what
I didn't say he said that. I said he's disarming anyone at PorcFest who wants to hear him speak. That is what I said.
While they're at his event.
Who wants to hear him speak, right? If you want to hear him speak, you got to go to his event, right? So, yeah, if you want to go in there,
it's not like he's going to be camping next to me.
Security agents are going to disarm you in order to do that. But yet there's somebody online just within the last 24 hours who was saying, oh, my God, he said that, wow, he said he'd consider a pardon for Ross Ulbricht. Oh, wow, that's so exciting.
Yeah, people get these political boners for these guys every now and again.
I just don't understand it.
It's horrible.
I mean, Donald Trump's against the war, too. I mean, am I supposed to get all hot and bothered about him running for president, too? I mean, these people aren't libertarians. Oh, RFK, he posted a link to a Lou Rockwell article. He must be a libertarian.
He has 3 letters in his name.
He's a guy who is pandering to you.
Of course.
Okay, but he's pandering to us about not having a nuclear war with Russia. And literally no one on the Democratic side of things is even talking about that as a possibility.
Yeah. What about it, Ridley?
Yeah, having people pander to you is not a war crime. I don't think we need to be particularly upset with the fact that we should be rejoicing over the fact that these politicians who are not that libertarian are trying to woo us. And the more that goes on, the more it indicates that we're successful.
I get what you're
agree
saying
completely.
about that, but I wouldn't rejoice over it. These people are not of value in any way, shape, or form. They are dishonest by trade. You cannot believe a word that they say. Just because he says he's against this war doesn't mean he's against all wars.
I don't care, Ian.
And is this
he is introducing this into the conversation nationally, which is something that we cannot do in any other way.
Is he?
And that makes him. That's his second big base hit. In the sense that, like, I was listening to a podcast about two years ago that he was debating Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer, the authoritarian lawyer, about vaccine rights and stuff like that. And Kennedy took the libertarian position. He said he was a libertarian, and he wiped the floor with that authoritarian lawyer. So
Obama was also very good at debate and winning people over and speaking in terms that may or may not have resonated with certain people. My question is this RFK presentation going to be a unidirectional thing where he gets up and gives a speech using things like teleprompters? Or is he going to engage in debate with, say a libertarian, for example? Is he going to engage the crowd? Is he going to answer libertarian questions? Is he going to respect everybody's rights to bear arms while listening to him and engaging in this?
Well, that's going to create an interesting situation. There's going to be people protesting against him. There's probably going to be people who try to violate the rule, or people who try to, they all walk in with their guns and make the security disarm them. There's all kinds of interesting things that are going to happen. There's nothing wrong with the Free State movement being interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's if that's what people want to do, then that's fine. Just stop telling me he's a libertarian. I mean, I'm glad that he's anti-war. Apparently,
and that I think is absolutely fair. I'm not trying to tell you that he's libertarian.
No, you haven't said that.
I am trying to tell you that it is a good thing that we have this person who is going to at least introduce to the Democratic side of the nation the possibility of not going to war with Russia.
I mean, Democrats have been anti-war whenever they're not in power. So
baby steps. Let's keep reeling them in, just like with Tulsi Gabbard. She's baby steps, getting closer to the libertarian position and stuff like that.
No, she's not. Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, yeah, she changed her position on firearms.
So she could pander to the right wingers who she wants to give her money so she can run under their banner.
Tulsi Gabbard is absolutely useless. Like, her only useful feature was that she was on the left and therefore listened to by people who care about Democrats. Now she's not even there, and as a Republican, she's terrible.
Well, she could be a lot worse. And again, it's like you said, baby steps.
Well, there's never going to be any baby steps that do anything at the federal government level. I mean, we all understand that people like this, RFK, have no chance of winning an election. I'm not saying don't vote for him.
That's not true, actually.
I'm not saying don't vote for him, okay? If you are a registered Democrat or you're in a place where you can pull a Democrat ballot and you get the chance to vote for him instead of Joe Biden, go ahead, pull the ballot. I don't think there's any harm in doing that, but the odds that he's going to defeat Biden when Biden literally has the entirety of the Democratic National Committee backing him are
worked
very,
for Trump.
very slim.
The entire Republican National Convention was backing Jeb Bush. Look how that worked out.
Thank you, Dave, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. But the fact is, it doesn't matter who you put into Washington, D.C. You're not going to ever baby step that towards more freedom. It just has to crash and burn. More coming up. Is secession constitutional? Does it matter? After all, independence from a union or empire is rarely considered legal by the larger government. In 1776, it was certainly illegal for the colonists to violently rebel and secede from Great Britain, at least if you ask the British government. That secession was violent, whereas modern New Hampshire independence would be peaceful. The original secession involved colonists rebelling against their own king. In contrast, modern New Hampshire independence would involve a state exiting a union that it joined under a contract that has been thoroughly violated. In summary, there's nothing in the New Hampshire or U.S. constitutions that prohibits secession. Article 10 of the U.S. Constitution lists all of the actions that the states are prohibited from doing, and secession is nowhere to be found in Article 10. You can learn more about how we can peacefully divorce D.C. at nhindependence.org and join the movement at nhexit.us.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper with the Week in Review. This week, leaders from the G7 countries met in Japan, pushing for new sanctions against Russia to try and end the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement released at the summit in Japan, the leaders pledged to hold the Kremlin and those who assist it to account for the alleged illegal invasion. FSN's Chris Gilbert sent this report from Tokyo.
The message is clear, a renewed demand that Russia unconditionally withdraw all of its forces from Ukraine and end the war, which G7 countries say has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted immense suffering. It's vowing to starve Russia of the resources to continue the invasion, with heightened sanctions targeting machinery and technology Russia needs for the war. On top of this, the G7 plans to continue to dry up Russia's oil and mineral export revenue and restrict the international flow of Russian diamonds.
Negotiations continued in Washington this week to try and raise the debt ceiling and avoid a potentially catastrophic default at the start of June. President Joe Biden met congressional leaders at the White House for the second time. Both sides reported progress during the course of the week, and the president said he would be cutting his overseas trip short so he could return home quickly after the G7. But by the end of Friday, the Republican team said it was time to hit the pause button as talks came to a standstill. Benji Hire sent this report from Washington.
Real differences remain. We don't have movement yet. The damning quotes coming from a seemingly unproductive meeting between House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and administration officials. President Joe Biden is in Japan attending a G7 meeting, though his team insists it's working hard to find a bipartisan solution to avoid the country careening into a historic first, a potentially catastrophic debt default, if the government fails to increase the borrowing ceiling, a move required to keep paying the nation's bills.
One of the strangest stories of the week came from New York, with Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claiming they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple said that they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in the heart of Manhattan. The police and the city's mayor disputed that timeline. FSN Sally Patterson sent this report from New York as the news was breaking.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows and motorbike scooters, were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show. You can bring up anything you want here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you in the studio tonight, it's Ian,
Biggles Mountaineer, and the captain.
If you've been thinking about, if you're a liberty-minded person, that is, making the migration here to New Hampshire, as have done thousands of like-minded folks in the last couple decades, it's been starting to really pick up in the last couple of years. More people moving than ever before. If you're thinking about making that move, then you got to know where to land and what to do when you get here. And the folks over at Porcupine Real Estate, they've been putting together a series of webinars on these very topics: reasons to make the move to New Hampshire, what it's like when you're here, finding some of the housing, best practices for moving to the Free State. The topics include gun freedom, medical freedom, political freedom victories, some of the amazing success stories that maybe you haven't heard about. I mean, we talk about some things that happen here on Free Talk Club, but by no means can we cover it all, and they can't either, even in one webinar. So go and sign up for these. They're over at move.freetalklive.com. That'll take you right over to the Porcupine Real Estate website. The sign-up page is there. It's free to sign up, free to attend these webinars, and you'll get the info, the inside scoop from the people that are on the ground here in New Hampshire. Most of the people at Porcupine Real Estate are Free Staters themselves. Yeah. They're people who have moved here. They know the lay of the land. They know the community, and they'll take your questions. You go to move.freetalklive.com and get signed signed up there. Also, if you want to see what they've already done, just visit their YouTube channel, which is called Porcupine Real Estate. You can see past presentations there. But more importantly, sign up for the ones that are coming up at move.freetalklive.com and start planning your move to New Hampshire. You wanted to talk about something about the left and anti-war.
So Captain had brought up like, oh, well, the Democrats become anti-war when they're not in power. And it's like, well, wait a second. When Trump was in power, they didn't start becoming anti-war. They were super anti-Trump, but they were nowhere near anti-war. I miss the anti-war left.
They were proposed, or they
the
were...
ones that I knew were all like, oh, that's fine.
What was fine?
Like war.
Yeah.
Well, during Trump,
got in.
I think your point is during Trump, when Trump was actually doing things like withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, the left was mad about it. They wanted to stay in Afghanistan.
Right.
That's exactly right. And frankly,
whereas I don't mean to interrupt. I just want the listeners to have like the full scope of my thought here. It's that I lived amongst the lefts out there on the left coast, and so what I saw was like. I always sort of had this low-level respect for like the hippie types and folks who come, from that sort of a culture where it's, it's a little more free, right? Hippies tend to be freedom-oriented,
right?
And they were always anti-war. And then, like, as they grew up and like got jobs and went out into the world and made something out of themselves or whatever, like somehow it got all demented and warped, and they were no longer fundamentally against war, so it seemed. And it seems to change, at least according to my experience, of whenever they're not in power. And that's to say that if a Republican holds the presidency, then the Democrats suddenly aren't as anti-war as they were before.
Well, that has been the case a lot of the time, but I think that what happened was Obama did the most drone striking of any president. Was as much of a war hawk as W. Bush by any metric.
He made a freaking joke at his fundraiser about his daughter dating, and I sat down with the young man. I had 2 words for him. I said, "Predator drone." So he threatened like a 13-year-old kid with a Predator drone. Now he says, "Oh, it was a joke."
Right.
And like, okay, maybe it was, but still, you're the president of the largest empire planet Earth has ever seen, and you think it's okay to make a joke about drone striking your daughter's first boyfriend?
Wow. And the fact that this is the first black president means that he can do no wrong. And since one of the big feathers in his cap is getting bin Laden, so okay, well, that is our guy. That is who we define our tribe by. So okay, I guess we're war tribe now.
Yeah.
And since the left has become such a warlike tribe, that can no longer be a way of identifying yourself on the right.
Yep.
So the Republicans have like pulled back from being so war-oriented and such war hawks.
For the moment.
Well, and 10-ish years ago, maybe more, when I started sort of looking at investigating where I am politically in relation to everybody else and discovering, well, I'm nowhere. That's why I'm an anarchist. But like I discovered that the Republicans and the Democrats used to have opposite stances than they do today. So over the course of time, if you had a set of principles or a set of beliefs and you lived through this time, you would have, gone through this sort of flippening of political alignments. That doesn't happen with libertarianism because libertarianism is logic based. Its philosophy is principle based. And when you have principles, you don't have this flip-flopping of ideals and stuff like that. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, the only thing that changes with libertarianism is which part of liberty we focus on.
Right.
So like I'm very much of the opinion that the open borders in the sense of like you can, pass these imaginary lines if someone wants you somewhere and all of that. Like if someone wants you working here, you have every right to get there. I agree. However, I think that is a crown jewel that we can only achieve after we get rid of a whole lot of parts of state. Now, some people believe that you should focus on that immediately, and there's an argument there. Now, and some people are like, no, that's just completely unrealistic. Okay, well, their focus is obviously on something else. So we can argue about which part of liberty to focus on now. And, some people are like, okay, well, now is time to focus on drug deregulation and on legalization of that. And for me, like, I think that at this moment in time, the focus has to be on the military-industrial complex is getting us way too close to obliteration through nuclear war.
I think that, and respectfully, you have a point, but I think if human beings around the world could just focus on money for a minute, I think that, first of all, a lot more people are going to be willing to talk about that sort of openly and frankly because there's no fear, right? You're not afraid of money being dropped on you,
right?
Right? You're afraid of a big nuke, right?
Yeah.
So I think if people can focus on money, and this is just my opinion, of course, I think that, for me, is the hot topic because money should not be controlled by governments. And as soon as it's not, you get your freedom back.
Yeah, and for me, that is the number two, because the way I see it, because we have this new monetary technology that is just so ridiculously superior to everything that exists in the world, I think that if you
talking
just
about cryptocurrency.
Yes, I'm talking about cryptocurrency. I think that if you just give humanity a little bit of time, we are going to move our entire system over to this superior technology.
Yeah, it's like,
but it can't happen if you blow up half the world with your nukes.
I equate the cryptocurrency, people who are into it and like developing it, and then there's a whole bunch of like users who are surrounded by it, and a lot of them happen to be like freedom types, libertarians, anarchists, that kind of thing. I think that it's great, but I was having this analogy the other day, and what it reminds me of is before everybody moved from MySpace to Facebook, right? Like MySpace was the king. Right. It was the thing that you had. And then there's this little thing over here. It was like sort of a new classmates website. And there was only a few people who sort of trickled into it. And they discovered and, helped build it into something that became a thing that everybody just en masse moved to. Right. I feel like that can happen with cryptocurrency.
Right.
There's been, it's been a decade of all this development. Right. It's unhackable. It's secure. It's fast. All of the things, not to mention all the things that it can do that we haven't even touched on, right? It's, the tip of the iceberg as far as benefits to humanity have been exposed. And so I think that there's going to come a time when everybody just goes, yeah, okay, let's move over here. Yeah, and hopefully it'll be en masse, like the mass migration from MySpace to Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the 1991 of the internet. Like, we have this level of protocol figured out. Now, there's going to be an integration of that protocol into a higher level of protocol before we even think about making it something that is easy for the ordinary user to access.
Yeah.
But that is being built as we speak.
Yeah.
And once that gets built on it, okay, well, then suddenly we're at the 1999 of the internet. Oh, and then suddenly we're at the 2001 of the internet.
Right.
And it revolutionizes absolutely everything in human events. And if we were not on the edge of nuclear annihilation, I would be right there with you that we need to focus on money, because once we fix the money, then we can get rid of the military-industrial complex in the first place. But as long as we're on this edge where these psychopaths are threatening all of human existence, I think that has to take priority.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think if you want to support a candidate, even though you only agree with them on one or two issues in a primary for the Democratic side or for the Republican side, I mean, arguably, probably of all the Republicans, probably Donald Trump is the most peace-oriented candidate. And the difference is he actually did hold office. So with him, it's the devil you know, because you know what you got 4 years ago, versus DeSantis, who is from all evidence, a psychopathic police state neocon who actually apparently ordered people to be force-fed at Guantanamo Bay and then stood, watched, and laughed as people had tubes shoved down their throats and food forced into their bodies. Then you get this Vivek guy that wants to actually go and drop bombs in Mexico and literally go to a hot war with the Mexican drug cartels. I mean, the Republicans by no means are done with warmongering. It's just they're moving the theater of war from Afghanistan and Ukraine or whatever to Mexico, which is like, just a different version of insane.
Well, here's the thing. Government is not a whole bunch of things. It's not a charity. It's not a human rights organization. It's not all the fun things that people think it is. It is, in fact, a war machine. It is a war machine. And now, just because somebody says some really nice things doesn't mean when they get control of the war machine that they're going to be more peaceful. In fact, I would argue the opposite of that. Some of the most well-spoken and most peaceful-sounding candidates that ever ran for president got into the chair and dropped the most bombs and killed the most people.
Obama, didn't he promise to close Guantanamo Bay? Wasn't that one of the reasons?
You can keep your regular provider, and
which is why
George Bush said no new taxes. Bush won, that is.
Right, which is why it's hard to take any of these people seriously when they say, "Oh yeah, I'm anti-war. I want to shut down the military."
This RFK guy, I don't know anything about him, and I don't care to know anything about him. I know what I need to know. He wants control of the war machine, so screw him.
Now, and to his credit, he does. I mean. It's not just Peakless Mountaineer who's saying this. I did go to his website. He's got a whole article there about withdrawing from military bases.
Obama was really well spoken and well written too.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying people shouldn't just fall under these people's spell. You should be critical of these guys, and I think it's disappointing. And I've said this online, and it hasn't gotten much discussion, I don't think, on the show, that the preeminent liberty event of the year, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, is going to be featuring these lying politicians on their main stage. I think it's a real unfortunate decision.
If we were all there, like chucking tomatoes, tarring and feathering, that might be enjoyable.
Yeah, then they just make a big mess, and they just don't belong there. I get why they want to do it. They want to pander, right? Like the politicians certainly want to pander. And the libertarians who are organizing these speeches, they want to curry favor with these people. And I just don't understand why they think that's going to help them, in the same way that there was like 50 state reps here in New Hampshire who endorsed DeSantis this week, including like a dozen Free Staters who should know better than to get behind a snake like that and put their good names behind somebody who is pure evil like this guy. And it's so disappointing to see people playing the political game and losing their principles and their soul, to these people.
Live free, don't join.
Well, let's get back into the independence movement here, Captain. I was asking you earlier if your story from the Idaho Statesman
doesn't
have any comments.
Mention anything from they didn't interview anybody specifically.
Well, I got one here from the AFP that was reporting a little earlier this week on the secession movement there in Oregon. Again, for those just tuning in, we're talking about what's called Greater Idaho. The idea being that
why didn't they go further? Why didn't they call it Greatest Idaho?
Maybe that's coming later. But you can't skip over greater before
we might have an even greater Idaho.
So according to the story here at Yahoo News and the AFP, they interviewed a 64-year-old retiree, Debbie Price. And she is from Eastern Oregon. She is part of the local movement that wants to redraw the region's map so they can secede to join the more conservative neighboring state of Idaho. She said, "There's a lot more freedom in Idaho than there is here," said the legal assistant who traveled across the state border to remarry during the pandemic at a time when weddings were banned in Oregon. Among her list of grievances with Oregon are impending restrictions on carrying firearms, its decriminalization of the use of drugs. I thought she wanted more freedom. Well, anyway, its pro-choice stance on abortion and its support for LGBTQ rights. So once again, these are right-wingers. These are Republican types who they have a certain vision of what freedom means. And certainly I agree with them on guns, right? Like you absolutely should have a right to defend yourself. But if you believe in the freedom to possess the thing known as a gun, why don't you also believe in the freedom to possess a thing known as a drug? I mean, seems like a basic concept that just completely goes over the head of these Republican types.
We can't let them have drugs.
Price blames all these on the woke agenda, as she says, radiating out from Portland, the progressive metropolis in the northwestern state's coast. She said, "Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I want things to stay like they are," she said, who is a devout Christian and touted Idaho's ban on abortion. She says, "I'm not anxious to move forward and try and be what the world is going towards these days." So that's a little bit of an opinion here. Those are the people we're talking about. Those are the people that live on the eastern side of Oregon. And there's a strong argument that they just don't belong in the progressive styled Oregon, right? Like, if you go to the Greater Idaho website, they explain that the reason why the people on the left would support Greater Idaho is because why wouldn't the people on the left want to get these people out of their hair?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, as far as when you want to redraw state boundaries, you got to get both sides to agree, right? So Oregon state government has to agree, Idaho state government has to agree, but everybody wins from this particular proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
absolutely. All of the state changes that you would like to make as a lefty, they will no longer slow you down at all.
You go full speed ahead into socialism.
Exactly, right? You can go hard progressive and be effective at it, and you won't have all these fuddy-duddies on the other side of the mountains.
And then eventually, when the fuddy-duddies on the other side of the mountain, remain alive because everybody on the left side of the mountain dies of communism, then they can just take back over the left side.
Signs demanding to, quote, move Oregon's border sit alongside Trump 2024 placards in the vast rolling plains of the small corner of America, which has less than one person per square mile.
And I get your frustration with having something like making drugs illegal put under the banner of liberty, of freedom. That's nonsense. Yeah. Or to have these candidates called libertarians when they're not.
Which is why it's frustrating to see libertarians currying favor with the right. I mean, during the whole COVID thing, there was a lot of working together with some of the people on the right who were correct on the issue of, civil disobedience against mandates and things like that. They were absolutely right about that. But those of us who understand the people on the right, we know that they're still not truly our allies. They're not actually people who believe in freedom. They just want freedom for themselves to live how they want to live. If you're trans, they don't give a damn
That's
about
all
you.
Politics is, whether you're on the left or on the right. It's just your desire to control other people, which you have no right to. And this is why politics is horrible. This is why it's insane. This is why it's filled with violence. And this is why it's filled with liars and cheaters and thieves. And all the bad things you can think that people ever do become institutionalized in this organization of violence and coercion.
Yeah, and people need to realize that there's a difference between being libertarian and having a libertarian stance. So if you are a libertarian, then you want people to be allowed to determine how they defend themselves and what substances to put in their body and not murder people around the world. Yep. So you can ally yourself with one side for this issue and one side for that issue. You can find no allies when it comes to war. But realize that the left is not libertarian. They just have a libertarian stance. The right is not libertarian. They have a libertarian stance on the gun issue. And no one is libertarian when it comes to not wasting your money to murder people who do not need to be murdered.
Which is the majority of what the state does.
Yeah.
Some complain they can't kill wolves, threatening their livestock as easily as their neighboring ranchers in Idaho because of gun restrictions. Others blame...
No, that one's a different one. In Idaho, they did a major push to make it completely legal to kill wolves.
Like any old time, basically?
Yeah.
Others blame the decline of the vital local timber industry on the state's strict logging limits, which have forced many mills to close. Many are afraid Oregon could follow California in phasing out diesel and even gasoline-powered cars in favor of electric vehicles. 41-year-old logger Garrett Mahan said, "The diesel ban's a horrible idea, and I think it would destroy our economy." On a remote piece of land that has belonged to his family for a century, he stacks giant tree trunks with an industrial machine that, quote, you would never be able to run on a battery, he says. And he's right. They did that in California. They actually passed a law, I think it was this last year, that after a certain date, I don't know if it's 2026 or whenever it is, you will no longer be able to purchase brand new gasoline-powered devices like, a leaf blower or a generator or a lawnmower. It's all going to be electric mandated.
We've been talking about migrations, and one migration that I hear about frequently, or at least did, was the migration of Californians to places like Texas, for example. Sure. One of the least talked about migrations is the mass exodus of Californians all the way up the West Coast, right? Northern California, Oregon, Western Oregon, and Western Washington. In the 22 years that I lived in the Seattle area, I saw the Seattle area go from more of a melting pot into more of a leftist hellhole. right? Because like one of the things I loved about the we'll call it the mid-'90s Seattle was that it was very diverse. There were not sections of there wasn't segregation like there is in like Chicago and New York and that kind of thing. You didn't go to, there wasn't like a quote bad side of town unquote that was just called Tacoma. It's the town to the south of them. But like it was far more of a melting pot. But over the course of time, it became more and more lefty. That's the only word I can use to describe it, really. More and more communist. And it was disheartening for me to see. And like the more that went on, the more of like a sore thumb I sort of, I stood out. I mean, I kind of stand out. I look like this. So, I'm a recognizable dude. But like more and more, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by fascists.
Yeah. Well, honestly, what this looks like is cancer. So in cancer, you develop a tumor, and that tumor develops its own little ecosystem, and then it reaches a certain point where it's called metastasis, where it spreads itself into all of these other parts of the body. And that's exactly what happened with California. So you had this communist regime.
Cancerfornia?
Yeah. Yeah, you had this communist regime create an unlivable scenario for human life, and now all of these people have to flee California. The fact is, though, you can take the Californian out of California, you cannot take the communism out of the Californian. So they're taking these wretched policies, and Colorado is one of the states that they have absolutely ruined because of this. And I mean, they are still fighting somewhat because it's mostly like the cities of Denver, especially Boulder, like the Fort Collins, like the cities are definitely where the strongholds of this are. But they've basically taken over the state where I was born, and I had to leave. I'm just really glad that there was a place here that is not Texas, it's not Florida, it's not Idaho, it's not a Republican conservative place, it's not a communist lefty Oregon kind of place. No, it's libertarian.
I'm glad that the people are here, right? These people that are here, the people who have migrated here for freedom, they're why I'm here. I'm not here because New Hampshire, the plot of land is so awesome, right? I'm here because of the people.
For sure, and that's why we need more of those people here. We need thousands more. This movement, this migration of libertarians, voluntarists, liberty-loving anarchists, been going on for about 2 decades now, and it has had more success, both politically and outside of the system and community, than any other libertarian project on the planet in the history of the liberty movement. It can only get better the more people we get here. If you want to comment on Greater Idaho or whatever's on your mind, you can join us. Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people like passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper with the Week in Review. This week, leaders from the G7 countries met in Japan, pushing for new sanctions against Russia to try and end the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement released at the summit in Japan, the leaders pledged to hold the Kremlin and those who assist it to account for the alleged illegal invasion. FSN's Chris Gilbert sent this report from Tokyo.
The message is clear, a renewed demand that Russia unconditionally withdraw all of its forces from Ukraine and end the war, which G7 countries say has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted immense suffering. It's vowing to starve Russia of the resources to continue the invasion, with heightened sanctions targeting machinery and technology Russia needs for the war. On top of this, the G7 plans to continue to dry up Russia's oil and mineral export revenue and restrict the international flow of Russian diamonds. It also aims to further support vulnerable countries which are experiencing food scarcity due to the war. The G7 remains unwaveringly committed to Ukraine and will hold further discussions about the country's needs when President Volodymyr Zelensky joins the talks in person.
Negotiations continued in Washington this week to try and raise the debt ceiling and avoid a potentially catastrophic default at the start of June. President Joe Biden met congressional leaders at the White House for the second time. Both sides reported progress during the course of the week, and the president said he would be cutting his overseas trip short, not visiting Papua New Guinea and Australia as planned, so he could return home quickly after the G7. But by the end of Friday, the Republican team said it was time to hit the pause button as talks came to a standstill. Benji Hire sent this report from Washington.
Real differences remain. We don't have movement yet. The damning quotes coming from a seemingly unproductive meeting between House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and administration officials, whose demands, he says, are unreasonable. President Joe Biden is in Japan attending a G7 meeting, though his team insists it's working hard to find a bipartisan solution to avoid the country careening into a historic first, a potentially catastrophic debt default, if the government fails to increase the borrowing ceiling, a move required to keep paying the nation's bills.
One of the strangest stories of the week came from New York, with Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claiming they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple said that they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in the heart of Manhattan. The police and the city's mayor disputed that timeline. FSN's Sally Patterson sent this report from New York as the news was breaking.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows, and motorbike scooters were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. This week, Montana became the first US state to ban the Chinese-owned app TikTok. That ban comes into effect at the start of next year, but there has been increased scrutiny from authorities around the world concerning the collection of data by TikTok, with fears that that could be passed on to the Chinese government. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports.
It's not a surprise move at all. US authorities have for months been discussing security concerns around the social media platform. On Wednesday, Montana's governor signed the ban into law, the first such state to do so. In a statement, TikTok has responded saying the ban infringes on the First Amendment rights of the people of Montana. The company is expected to challenge the legislation in the courts.
Disney dropped plans this week to relocate staff from California to a new corporate campus in Florida, amid a high-stakes feud with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. FSN's Tony Waterman had this report.
This was a nearly $900 million investment for Disney and would have added more than 2,000 jobs in the Sunshine State, most of those employees coming from Southern California. The company is in the midst of laying off 7,000 workers, and just last month it sued DeSantis after the Florida governor stripped Disney of its special self-governing status. Disney claims this was in retaliation to criticism of the state's Don't Say Gay bill. DeSantis says it's about not giving Disney special treatment.
Crammed into tiny bar stools, cramped diner booths, and filthy cars where moving their limbs is either uncomfortable or impossible, hundreds of thousands of consumers rip apart chicken wings or tear off bites of Heroes and hamburgers every single day, often to the point of bloating, belching, and outright physical pain. Barbecue sauce or hamburger juice will literally dribble down these poor beasts' mouths and onto their shirts, their beards thick with pungent grease. Treated as little more than machines to be stuffed full of smoked pork, marinated chicken, and dry-aged beef, consumers are forced to wait in long lines, often while still fully conscious, before buying their meat and ripping it off the bone with their mouths in plain view of other consumers. The majority of meat consumers are often prodded to ingest vastly more than their bodies can handle thanks to cruel promotions like 25-cent wing nights and family-sized buckets of chicken. Help stop the brutality by visiting.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the second hour here of this live Saturday episode. The phones are open if you want to join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We have been talking about the Greater Idaho movement, a movement of people in eastern Oregon that would like to no longer be part of Oregon.
Can we just call it the more mediocre Idaho movement?
Having never been there, I can't really make a call on what part of it would be more mediocre, but the people in Oregon are about sick and tired, at least the eastern Oregon folks, sick and tired of being part of that political designation, and they'd rather be with a more conservative, in their minds, political designation. Personally, I don't want to be in either place.
They could rename it Conservaho.
They might. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do over there. But right now, what they have to do first is get out of Oregon. And the thing is, they don't want to physically move. You know, they've got farms and they've got families and people are dug in where they are. They got businesses. And even though they could just hop across the border and have a better lifestyle or whatever, more conservative life in Idaho, they'd rather rally the troops, vote, as apparently 12 counties have now done in eastern Oregon, to not leave per se, but ask their county delegates or whatever they're called to have a discussion about what it would take to say goodbye to Oregon politically and join Idaho. If you want to comment on that, you're welcome to join us. Major Payne is on the line. You can also bring up anything you want.
But
Major Payne, you're on Free Talk Live, calling from Michigan. Go ahead.
Yeah, if these guys get this any kind of close to fruition, the Democratic Party is going to fight it tooth and nail.
Why?
Just because I said the Democratic Party will fight this.
I heard what you said.
Why?
Why would they do that?
Because of Libtardia. They control all the populace along the coast. Therefore, they control the whole state. They don't want to lose the electoral college votes. That and the tax basis for the states, too, is going to come into play with all this. So
you're saying the National Party will fight it because they'll...
on with this.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I got another political hot potato.
Oh, hold on.
Right. So you're saying the National Party will fight this because they don't want to lose the electoral college votes, even though the state Democrats will probably be all in favor of it.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, but I don't.
Would they though?
I don't think the Democrats in the state are going to be all in favor of it either, because they don't want to lose the tax revenue.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you have to have people to steal tax money from. And so if the people who want to steal most or tax money the most, the left, sort of don't have a whole bunch of people to steal from, where are they going to get their money?
That is a problem.
You'd rather steal from than the people you don't even like on the other side of the mountain.
Right.
True, and you could argue that a lot of the people on the right maybe are more likely to have their own businesses, maybe a little more productive.
The right's just the same, except on the other side. They would also like to control everybody and have everybody
but they know
live to
they
their
can't.
preference.
They know they can't win in Oregon. They are outnumbered, outvoted by the people on the left. So I mean, there is an argument to say that some people on the left would want to keep their sucking the blood or the energy, the money out of the people who are on the right, and they wouldn't want them to go away because then they wouldn't be able to live off of them. But on the other hand, it is an annoyance to have to fight constantly over the things that you want to pass at the state level, and if the Republicans are gone from the state house largely, then it will be completely Democrat controlled. There's no chance the Republicans would stand in the way or stop a vote on something, and they'd be able to move it forward. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, they're similar but distinct motivations here, right? So the left wants to hold on to the people on the right because that's who they're getting their money from.
Right.
And the right wants to hold on to the people on the left because that's who they want to order around.
Right.
Like, you'd have people calling in like, no, this is our country and I want to be able to tell them what to do. Like, everyone's like, no, this is ours. We need to take it back. And what they really mean is, I want to be able to tell these people to stop doing these things that they want to do.
Yep.
Whether it be gay married or smoke marijuana.
Exactly.
Or whatever that happens.
That's exactly it. So even though, they're the ones who have the money, they have this desire to tell these people in the cities mostly what to do with their lives. Not to get gay married, not to do all these drugs, and we will kidnap you if you do. And on the other hand, the people who are running the cities, they realize that they don't have any productivity there.
The fundamental lesson here for those people listening or maybe new to this show is that humankind needs to get over the desire to tell other humans what to do. You don't get that right.
Well, I mean,
to steal their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously these are people who haven't per se gotten over that, but at least the people in the greater Idaho movement have gotten over the idea that they can, they're not going to be able to do it in Oregon, at least. That they've given up. They say, you know what, it would make more sense if we could just live somewhere around more people that are like us.
Wait, if Idaho gets greater, does that mean we get more and better potatoes?
Perhaps. What else, Major?
Well, evidently there's a congresswoman down from Georgia, and she started impeachment proceedings against Biden. Biden.
I'm sure that'll go nowhere.
For what?
His handling of the Mexican border debacle.
Impeachment.
What does that even mean?
What was his handling
he's
of the
done
Mexican
the exact
border?
same thing that Trump did.
What he did wrong. This was just a quick news blip I heard.
It's just a conservative talking point. I mean, I'm sure you're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's the Georgia rep that everybody talks about.
Right, yeah.
I mean, she's just she's an ultra right Trump supporting person.
It's just political circuses.
That's all it is. I mean, Biden has been cracking down on immigration just like Trump did. Okay, they continue to separate children from families. They continue to send peaceful people back into to Mexico who could help us here by working hard, bringing prices down, by working hard and all that. And there's been no change that Joe Biden has brought into play.
And I think the first president I remember, like as a small child, was Carter. And I knew nothing about politics and was too young to even comprehend what was going on. And Reagan was next. And I think, including Reagan, I think impeachment was mentioned for every president during my life. At some point, somebody was like, "Oh, we're going to try and impeach him for that, and impeach for that, and impeach him." And so it's like crying wolf.
Well, I guess Major is saying she's filed some papers or whatever. So I mean, maybe that's because the Congress is Republican now. So.
Well, they are bureaucrats, Ian. They must have forms just laying around.
Well, and I honestly don't care. What I would care about, even knowing that it wouldn't go anywhere, if she filed for, say, you're a war criminal who is violating the Geneva Convention presently, That would be interesting. But
no.
of course, she can't do that because that might tie the hands of Republican candidates from being war criminals.
Thank you, Major, for the call tonight. Appreciate it. Let's talk to The Situation. He is actually calling from Oregon. And I know you were calling about immigration tonight, The Situation, but I did ask you off the air if you've been aware of this whole greater Idaho movement. You live in Western Oregon, so it may not be something that is too concerning to you, but has there been any buzz at all, amongst friends or coworkers? Are people talking about this that you've heard?
Well, first of all, I want to give out a shout out to my buddy Ricky from the Commonwealth, the Confederate Libertarian.
No, he's not a libertarian.
No.
He calls himself a Confederate Democrat.
That's what I meant. Sorry, thank you.
The
for
Confederate
correcting me.
Democrat. Yep.
Tell him hello and I love him, and that's awesome.
It's very nice of
We
you.
got into it.
What was it that? But your thoughts on the whole greater Idaho? Are you hearing anyone talking about that? Is there a discussion amongst friends? Water cooler talk.
There's I don't know how many counties are in the state. There's well over 30 counties.
Mm-hmm.
And the major counties that basically run the state, that get all the votes on the left side, that control everything, the supermajority are Portland area, Salem, the capital area. I don't know the capital or the county names.
It's the big cities, right?
Eugene, which are the bigger cities. They run the state.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rest of the state, the other 30 counties or whatever, the majority of the state is pretty red. And a lot of Espanolas in Oregon. And so they're obviously conservative. And I don't think the Democrat type people or any political party really realizes how conservative the Espanolas are in Oregon.
What is an
So
Espanola?
I don't know if they're a part of the.
Are you referring to Spanish-speaking individuals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do tend to have a conservative viewpoint. A lot of migrants are Catholics.
Latinos, Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
but it sounds
it's part of why it's so strange to see the rallying on the right about the border is because, guys, they're Christian and they vote that way.
Yeah, the right just is totally screwing the whole immigration thing up. They could have huge support.
There's a whole other argument with that. The immigration thing. That's just a side note there. But I mean, you're getting way too many people in here versus the resources we have to support them.
What do you mean too many people? I mean, the story we were just reading about Eastern Oregon says there's one person per square mile on average.
I didn't mean. I kind of traveled off to the border issue on that. I'm just saying.
What do you mean there's too many people?
Take that big of an influx at the border.
What are you talking about? There's hardly anybody down there. There's hardly anyone in the western United States. I mean, it's mostly unpopulated with the exception of the cities.
Because it's desert and there's no water.
That didn't stop Las Vegas.
You might want to travel to the border communities and see what's actually going on.
We've actually had Sheriff David Hathaway call in from Santa Cruz County, Arizona. He's a border sheriff, and he's lived there his whole life. And he's told us what's going on.
Is that the only one you've talked to?
He's the only one who actually understands human liberties. So, yeah, I'm not going to waste my time with anyone else.
Human liberties as well. But I'm just saying, if that's your only resource, you need to go down there and check it out, because I've been there and it's a pretty rough deal.
What's rough about it?
Anyway, what's that?
What do you mean it's a rough deal? What does that mean?
You have people coming across the border with nowhere to go, nothing to do.
Well, if they actually have nothing to do, then they'll probably go back home. But
that's my entire 20s. But
my understanding of people coming here is usually they're looking to work. And from what I've seen, there's a lot of people hiring, at least around here. They come on up here. They could, as long as there weren't these stupid government rules standing in the way about hiring people from down south, they'd get a job in no time, because these are people who largely are willing to work. They do want to work because they want to send money back home to their loved ones in Mexico or wherever, Guatemala.
Yeah, if you want to solve the problem of a bunch of people with nothing to do, get them jobs. But they are not allowed to have jobs in this country because they don't have their paperwork in order.
And we're giving them health care and snippets of money.
I'm not giving them health care.
Yeah, we are. We're paying for clinical. Yeah,
well,
we are.
I mean, no, there is actually an argument that you yourself are giving them health care. That health care is being paid for by money printing, and you use the money. So,
So what it sounds like, as usual with people on the right, with their discussions about immigration, is you're upset about welfare, and
no, I hold on. I heard you talking earlier about the welfare thing and me being kind of conservative. I'm pro if you're going to be on welfare, you need to, here's your 6 months or a year, and then you need to get off of it. And if you could pay it back, that'd be great.
But what I'm hearing from you, maybe I misunderstood you. It sounded to me like your concern is with people coming here that they are getting health care, and that to me is a welfare program, which is something that the government is doing. They're forcibly making it so you and the rest of us have to pay for other people's health care, and that's the objection, right? That's your concern. That's the reason why you don't want people coming here.
No, my objection and concern is that a certain amount of people overwhelm a system. If you build a ship, and the ship's designed to carry 1,000 people, right? Of course, America's not a ship; it's a piece of land.
Now, the system you're talking about is the welfare system.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So what's the number? What's the
let's
number?
sink that sucker now.
What's the number in Oregon? How many people was the ship of Oregon welfare built to handle? How many people?
I don't know, but it's tipping over here.
Well, how do you know if you don't know how many people it was built to handle? How do you know if it's too many? How do you know when it's overwhelmed?
Well, just keep paying taxes as long as you go to work. I'm still working, so I probably have, I don't know, a couple $1,000s a month I could pay into the system to keep it afloat.
And this is the thing. You don't know any of this, and you can't know. Like, number one, it's not your job. Number two, you're a single individual. Number three, you're not there on the ground seeing what the situation is. You cannot possibly know what the right way to do all of this stuff is. The way to solve that problem is to have a market in charity, so that you have independent charities. Like, look, I get what you're aiming at with the, like, okay, 6 months to a year. Maybe that's too little. Maybe that's too much. Maybe that works here and it doesn't work here. You know how we solve that problem? We have a market, so that people that know the individual circumstances there, that are motivated to do the most good for the least cost, actually solve the problem, instead of us trying to do a one-size-fits-all solution from 100 miles away.
Bam. Mic drop.
I'm trying to say we don't have that solution right now. I'm trying to say that you have.
But you would support that?
Without a system to take care of that.
Okay, but the situation, I just want to clarify, would you support the quote-unquote system, if you want to call it that, or the lack thereof, the market-based system that Peakless Mountaineer was just
totally.
Okay, you would support that. All right, so in the event that we could actually do that, get rid of the government welfare program and have charities, churches, individuals, they're the ones who are helping out. They're the ones who are voluntarily providing health care or housing or food or whatever it is that people in need. Then you'd be fine with people coming into the country, right?
Totally.
Okay.
But you're
that's awesome.
You're loading the ship before you have ballast and bilge pumps or any equipment to handle what's going on right now. I mean, from what I understand, I don't know for sure, but the way I was educated, we allowed 1 million people in the country. The U.S. government permitted 1 million immigrants a year.
And it's the same problem. It's the same problem. Like, is that too many? Is that too few? You cannot know that from Washington. You can't know if that's too many. You can't know if that's too few. What you can do, if you've got a market in these things, then you can have people make those decisions independently, and you can follow principles. Like the principle of, hey, we want workers over here. Okay, well, then you can have workers over there. Hey, we don't want people moving in from south of the border here. Okay, then you can deny those people rent because they come from Mexico. You have to allow these things to happen, and then we can have an adaptive system, find out maybe 1 million is too few, maybe it's too many. Let's find out, because the idea of like there's this ship, and if you just load it with too many people, it'll sink. I mean, you're assuming it. Your analogy assumes your conclusion going in. Now, what you have is a really, really complicated system in which we don't know how many people can fit on this ship, because it wasn't designed for a specific number of people, and it's an organism.
Well, here's the other thing. And thank you, this situation, for the call. If the system fails, if there are too many people that come into it or whatever, the good news is the charities will pick up the slack.
Yeah.
If there's people who are not getting taken care of by the system and it completely breaks or whatever, the good news is there's still people who care about other people. There's still people running a food bank over here. There's still people running a private homeless shelter over here. I'm talking about where we live. And there's a lot of these things in a lot of places. People will step up and they will help their neighbors.
Everything that resembles any kind of a welfare program put on by government can and should be a GoFundMe.
Yeah, but they kind of suck. I mean,
okay, but I'm just saying that like you can crowdsource this stuff easily and get help directly to the people who need it, get it to them better, get it to them quicker than you can by relying on the behemoth, the slow-moving ox, the elephant, if you will, known as government.
Let's go to this caller. You're on Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Hey, Matthew.
Matthew, you're on the air.
Hey, I'm just calling because I think that the immigration debate kind of gets clouded because what people get frustrated with are the benefits. And so what you have is that the people that are coming here now are claiming asylum, which is different than migration. So with asylum, the federal government will provide you with housing assistance and a whole host of benefits that normal migrants don't get. And so what you have is these large groups of people that are migrating across the border to claim asylum to get the benefits that come with that. You can see it most prominently in Maine, mostly with people from Western Africa, where there are towns that are maxed out because the federal government basically comes in and buys out hotels to house the people that are claiming asylum status, when migration is what would be more beneficial, because then you wouldn't have all that trail of benefits that comes with that asylum status.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Unfortunately, the federal government still exists, and while they exist, they will likely continue to offer asylum status, which is a protection, right? So these are people who ostensibly are being persecuted in some way, shape, or form where they're coming from, and sort of like Edward Snowden. He applied for asylum in Russia,
right?
As I understand it, to protect him from the United States government, and these are people who are doing the same thing. I mean, I don't necessarily think that everyone who needs asylum would necessarily need to have a bunch of handouts. I do find myself wondering what portion of the people who claim asylum are able to work and are willing to work versus those who are taking the handouts. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, well, so the thing is that if you say the right words, you can qualify as an asylee. And so basically you say, like, I can't be in my home country because I'm being persecuted for, usually for Central America, it's usually gangs. So they say, like, I can't stay there because the gangs will threaten my family. And then once you have that hook in, you qualify for the benefits that come with asylee status. And I think that the thing that what we could fix this with was to go back to Mark's blue card, where basically, like, you can come here and do whatever you want as long as you promise to never take any benefits. And I think that would quiet a lot of the people like the situation. Or
can I claim asylum from my own government?
No, unfortunately not.
Nice.
You have to go physically somewhere else.
You have to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah, there's this one ever-present gang everywhere I go. It's called the state.
Yeah,
and it seems to target me all of the time.
It sucks, too, because when you go to another place, you are then there as their guest, essentially. And so, like in Russia, you better believe Edward Snowden's keeping his mouth shut about what Putin is doing to people over there and what tyranny they have to deal with.
And I think they'd still complain because they were receiving health care in emergency rooms.
What gets me about the benefits argument for asylum seekers or migrants is that, it's the cost, they're overwhelming the system. Well, look at the cost of war. That's a far larger number.
Right.
Hey, thank you, Matt, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. It would be nice if somebody was proposing the idea at the federal level that he's talking about, but no, they just want to crack down. More coming up.
Never, ever send a follow-up email asking, "Did you get my email?" Email 101. If it didn't bounce back undeliverable, it got where you sent it. And avoid transmedia pestering, like calling to ask, "Did you get my email?" or emailing to say, "I left you a voicemail." If your emails and voicemails aren't being acknowledged, your problem isn't technology, it's technique. Is your message concise and understandable? Have you boiled it down to seem as relevant as possible to the recipient? In other words, is it the opposite of spam or junk mail? All of this really matters if you're a job seeker. But even if you're not, with money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper with the Week in Review. This week, leaders from the G7 countries met in Japan, pushing for new sanctions against Russia to try and end the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement released at the summit in Japan, the leaders pledged to hold the Kremlin and those who assist it to account for the alleged illegal invasion. FSN's Chris Gilbert sent this report from Tokyo.
The message is clear, a renewed demand that Russia unconditionally withdraw all of its forces from Ukraine and end the war, which G7 countries say has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted immense suffering. It's vowing to starve Russia of the resources to continue the invasion, with heightened sanctions targeting machinery and technology Russia needs for the war. On top of this, the G7 plans to continue to dry up Russia's oil and mineral export revenue and restrict the international flow of Russian diamonds.
Negotiations continued in Washington this week to try and raise the debt ceiling and avoid a potentially catastrophic default at the start of June. President Joe Biden met congressional leaders at the White House for the second time. Both sides reported progress during the course of the week, and the president said he would be cutting his overseas trip short so he could return home quickly after the G7. But by the end of Friday, the Republican team said it was time to hit the pause button as talks came to a standstill. Benji Hire sent this report from Washington.
Real differences remain. We don't have movement yet. The damning quotes coming from a seemingly unproductive meeting between House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and administration officials. President Joe Biden is in Japan attending a G7 meeting, though his team insists it's working hard to find a bipartisan solution to avoid the country careening into a historic first, a potentially catastrophic debt default, if the government fails to increase the borrowing ceiling, a move required to keep paying the nation's bills.
One of the stranger stories of the week came from New York, with Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claiming they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple said that they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in the heart of Manhattan. The police and the city's mayor disputed that timeline. FSN Sally Patterson sent this report from New York as the news was breaking.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows and motorbike scooters, were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join us here and you can bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. Phone lines are loaded up right now, so you might be getting a busy signal if you're calling. Just stand by until you hear somebody drop off the line. We do still have the SIP line available, the super important person line. Wasn't it one of you guys that came up with that? That's a good one. It is an internet method of calling into the show. It actually is really useful, especially if you're outside of the United States. You can call in for zero cost. Go to sip.freetalklive.com. Anyone can do this. As long as you have a semi-decent internet connection, you'll sound better, likely, than if you're just calling in on the phones. And almost no one ever uses that line, so it's really easy to get through if you call the SIP line. But you do need to follow the instructions to get it working. Great. It just takes a few minutes to get it set up. Go to sip.freetalklive.com. And I want to make sure you know that this hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Last year, Dash launched a killer app that allows you to spend Dash at over 155,000 locations across the United States, including major retailers, brands you're familiar with, probably places you already shop. And the killer aspect of this is that not only do you get to spend your Dash, but you get a discount at most of these places for paying with Dash. So
I don't remember which place it was, but the 8% the other day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Now, most of them aren't that high.
No.
You're typically looking at 4 or 5%, somewhere in that range. Sometimes as low as 2 or 3, but there are some that are 8, 9, 7% up there.
It's like, wow,
pretty
that's
awesome.
impressive.
So, and you're a Dash Direct. It's called Dash Direct. And Captain, you've been using Dash Direct since before Dash became a sponsor on the show. This is something you found on your own. You were very interested in, and it's
same here.
You as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I am surprised that other cryptocurrencies that are trying to be a means of transaction are not developing the ability for people to transact with their physical businesses.
Right. That's the next logical step of adoption is let's make it easy for people to spend it.
Exactly right. And Dash seems to be the only one that's really working on that.
So the way I got to it was I came through. So I used Purse. We advertised that here on
SaveAPurse.com.
SaveAPurse.com. I used that a few times, and I really liked it. And it has its place for certain things.
Yeah.
Then I found, I think it's Bit Refill and Crypto Refills.
These are gift card
websites. Yeah. And it's a little cumbersome to go through it. You really have to want to spend your cryptocurrency to go through these websites. It does work, but you've got to be sort of an advanced thinker. But with the Dash Direct app, you could just be at a place as long as there's Wi-Fi or whatever, like a restaurant, for example, and you search it on the app. Yep, it's here. Oh, they take. Okay, sweet. And you just, when you get your bill, you just put in the amount and bam, 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 and it's done.
It's quick.
Yeah.
It's amazing, at least my understanding. I've never had the chance to use it.
A couple of these restaurant chains have where they bring you the kiosk at your table to pay, and you can actually even include the tip in the final amount that you pay, and they'll have you scan a QR code to pay for it.
Handy.
So it's almost, it's just as easy as paying with like Apple Pay or a credit card.
Except you get a discount with Dash Direct.
Discount. Yeah.
Right.
The stores, again, they have their own discount level, and that's a cool aspect of it. And they'll show you what they are when you go through the list. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies. It's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can start by learning more at dash.org. You can get that Dash Direct app, which is different from the Dash wallet, by the way. Now, I've heard there's discussion about moving them into the same wallet, the same program. That may be coming at some point, but for right now they are separate. It's Dash Direct. Get that at your Apple or Android app store and learn more about Dash at dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air here on Free Talk Live. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. That's dash.org.
Thank you, Dash.
We go to the phones here. We got Steve. He's on the line in Vermont. Steve, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hey, how you guys doing?
What's on your mind tonight?
I was just calling because I wanted to see if you guys had any advice on how to mentally prepare to go to jail for 10 years to life. I'm 22 years old and I committed a nonviolent crime, so I'm looking at 10 to life right now. I won't say what it is.
My God.
I'm trying to get advice to see how I can mentally prepare myself and then also deal with being there.
Are we talking about state prison?
So it makes it harder.
Is this a state prison thing? Federal prison? What are we talking about here?
It's going to be federal prison.
And is this going to be like maximum security? Is it going to be a minimum security camp? I imagine those are going to be important questions.
It's going to be a medium security.
Okay.
Well, having not been to prison, I really don't have much advice. The only thing that I could think of for somebody in that position would be to find a purpose before you go in. Have a thought in mind of like what you want your life to be. Are you going to write a book? Are you going to, what is it that you're going to do? There's something that you can do. Find a purpose while you're in there, because that will keep you alive. A man can't live fully unless he has a purpose. And so if you can find one before you go in, have a goal in mind. Okay, well, I'm going to be in. This is what I'm going to spend my time doing. Some prisons will have like college classes you can take and all that kind of stuff. So there's all sorts of things you can pursue, but figure out what that is so that you have a goal in mind as you go in. And that way you won't be as affected by, well, of course, being a prisoner.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to come from on this. I mean, I've only ever been to jail, which is a whole other story. Prison, as I understand it, is very different. But when I went to jail back in 2011 for civil disobedience, I spent 58 days here in the Cheshire County spiritual retreat, as we like to call it. Yeah. And I intended to have that be as positive of an experience as I possibly could. And it turned out to be, all things considered, I'd have rather been somewhere else, but it wasn't a bad time. It was, pretty decent, all things considered. So I think having your mindset being positive going into it means you'll probably see more of whatever good side there is there to be seen, if that's what you kind of meditate on and focus on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I thought that was a great way of framing your experience, was as a spiritual retreat. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's sort of like it's like being a refugee. You have to go to a completely different country with a completely and fundamentally different culture. So, like, this is a new life for you. And the captain is absolutely correct about, like, having something that is worth doing. So for myself, if I was going to be put in prison, I would probably devote myself to what they call lawfare, because you still have certain legal rights and still have the ability to file suits from within the prison. And they tend to have a remarkable amount of access to legal libraries because of people who are still fighting their sentencing or making an appeals process. But yeah, it's a completely new life, and it's worth seeing it as such. I will say that, like, psychologically, the way that a human being is set up, if you are exposed to whichever level of existence for a long enough period of time, it becomes your baseline. So you do get used to it, and from
institutionalization is what they call
it. And from that baseline, it really comes down to how you choose to perceive the world. So, like, if you are paying attention to what you don't have that you like, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you. But if you pay attention to, for example, hey, I no longer have to pay a single bill for the rest of my time here. If you no longer pay attention to all of the things that were stressing you out about your ordinary life that no longer exist, if you pay attention to the things that you want to do with your life while you're there, then that can be a much more positive experience for you.
I think too that if I were in this situation, that I might lean towards either becoming clergy or becoming I don't know what they call it inside prisons, but it would be an inside counselor, right? So you're a counselor to the other inmates, because there are legal things like you're talking about, Peakless, where if the inmates say something to somebody who is employed by government, then the government has to act on those words, whereas they can say things to another inmate that the other inmate doesn't have to take any action. So you could effectively be a counselor to other people. And again, I don't know your situation exactly or what the situation of this person is that you're talking about, but I'm going to guess that odds are once they go inside, they're going to find somebody else in a worse situation. And so if you can be of any assistance to them, just being a friend, a comfort, a voice that they can talk to, that kind of a thing, I think that would put you in a better position to survive the ordeal.
Yeah, it's very true. When you focus on making the world around you better,
right,
it does make it easier for, like, you experience a better world while you're trying to make the world better.
Yeah, I mean, you are still going to deal with bureaucracy. There's going to be a lot of it that is not fun or anything like that, but it really is, whether it's an absolutely torturous, hellish experience or just a place where you can focus on other things like Pickles was talking about and grow yourself in different ways than you otherwise would have, is really up to you to decide. You can be the prisoner that's there and angry and in despair and pounding on your door day and night and pissing everybody off, or you can be somebody who's there to at least try to connect with people that are there and have a positive of an experience.
Find a way to help others, and your life will have far more meaning.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
And I know that, like Ian, I haven't been to prison, but I have been to jail, and I know that in the time leading up to that, the anxiety that I felt about that change was actually way more than was warranted by the change itself. So right now, in this time, it's very easy to be consumed by fear, by anxiety about the upcoming change. But if you just take a deep breath, take a step back, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and accept what is happening to you for what it is, then that gives you a much stronger position to be able to adapt and to plan and to figure out what you're going to do with this change in life experience.
That sounds good. Thanks for the advice.
Hey, thanks for reaching out. Good luck on the sentencing there, man. I hope you get on the lower end.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. The number here is 603-283-6160.
I can't even fathom,
knowing that was coming. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel the same way about you with what you're facing.
Oh, yeah.
They
would love to, prosecutors, I'm sure, would love to have me spend many years behind bars. So.
I kind of take it as a given that that is always one of the options, because I'm fighting for liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm fighting to end the largest gang that the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
I'm fighting to end this entire style of existence, that we have this acceptance for one criminal gang in a given geographical area.
Yeah.
So of course they're going to target me, and certainly one of the things that is very easily in their arsenal is putting me in prison.
Yeah, make no mistake, all of us sitting here, and even our callers, to that extent, we are taking a risk. Talking the way we do, speaking the way we do, we are definitely taking a risk. Why do we take that risk? We don't do it for ourselves. We do it for you.
We go on here. Let's talk. And by the way, just more about the prison thing. There's, I'm sure, many people who have spent time in federal he said medium security prisons. Yeah. I'm sure you can go online and either connect directly with them or read their writings about what things were like, to give you some idea of what to expect. Let's go to Shortwave Surfer calling on our SIP line at sip.freetalklive.com. Hello there.
Well, hello there.
Welcome, sir. You're on the air.
So the thing with the prisons and things like that is the governments are just making martyrs out of people.
Yep.
Ross Ulbricht is a martyr, and people still love him and appreciate what he did with the harm reduction of the Silk Road.
Mm-hmm.
You are a martyr, and you are fighting your sentence, and that is a beacon of hope to everybody, at least in my opinion.
Oh, thanks.
That's
I
the way
appreciate it.
see it.
By the way, Ross Ulbricht is posting to Twitter from inside of the prison, I presume.
Is that actually him? I thought it was relayed somehow.
I presume it's relayed.
Yeah,
you're not going to get a Twitter app in
I was going to say,
prison. But he's probably calling or emailing
maybe he's
or
got
something.
a carrier pigeon that he writes things on, and whoever receives it then tweets it.
He writes a letter to his mom, and his mom posts for him.
It's probably something like that. Yeah, but somebody's posting for him, and I'll just give you a couple of his, because I know he's in. I don't know if it's Max or whatever, but he's in some pretty serious lockdown, and
he's in federal prison.
And these martyrs, as you call them, really do become sort of a benchmark, because Trump can go on there and be like, yeah, I'm going to drain the swamp and freedom and all of that, and it's like, okay, but how did you treat Ross Ulbricht? How did you treat Edward Snowden?
Mm-hmm.
How did you treat these martyrs?
There's a post here from May 16th, so just a few days ago, that kind of plays into what we were just talking about. Ross says, today I set a strong intention to win the day And it's been going great. I got up early to meditate before they unlocked the cells. I stayed focused and upbeat. I got a lot done and tied up loose ends that have been nagging at me. Feels good.
Nice.
So it's not easy, especially in a case where, for Ross, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's the potential for a commutation at some point if you can find some president to somehow be persuaded to do that. Probably not going to be Joe Biden. But there's no end to his sentence. He has a double life sentence plus 40 years. So it can be so easy to let that overwhelm you. And I know at times he has been pretty depressed about that. But here he is, more than a decade into being behind federal prison bars, and he's shifted his perspective. He's trying to stay as positive as he possibly can. And here he is 10 years in saying he's still able to have a good day.
While I'm thinking about it, another resource for our previous caller might be talking to veterans who were POWs, who survived being a prisoner of war, right? And find out, what did you do? How did you occupy your time? How did you get by? And, ask a bunch of different people. Somebody will resonate with you, and, you'll get the answers you seek.
And one of the things that I think about with Ross is that, I mean, sure, you have absolutely been struck by your opponent, but you have already, like, the pivotal moment in which he created a marketplace for cryptocurrency has absolutely altered the course of history.
Absolutely.
The fact that, what can you do with Bitcoin? The fact that someone answered, what can you do with Bitcoin? The fact that Ross Ulbricht made this marketplace for this means that this got a chance to live and thrive and will one day take down the very system that is imprisoning him now.
Yeah, most importantly, proving that anarchism in theory can be applied to practice successfully, because cryptocurrency, a.k.a. Bitcoin, is anarchic philosophically and mechanically, and it just works.
By the way, he is at RealRossU. If you want to follow him on Twitter, that's at RealRossU. And he's got some really interesting posts. He doesn't post very often, obviously, because he's got to send them to somebody else. Anyway, Shortwave Surfer, what else did you want to share here?
With this, with the welfare state, my personal thought is that welfare can be fine as long as you're not, quote unquote, wasting it on vices. So my thought is, instead of giving somebody $1,000 a month or whatever, you pay their phone bill, or you pay their mortgage, or you pay their
something practical.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want to give a homeless person cash because they could go spend it on drugs.
Sure.
But if they were hungry, I would absolutely go to the McDonald's or whatever and buy them a burger and bring it to them. I would be perfectly fine doing that.
Well, and with that, I think you have to look at the difference in incentive between a private charity and taxes being put toward these welfare programs. Now, with taxes being put toward these welfare programs, they don't care about the actual welfare of the people that they're so-called helping.
Right.
They don't care if you do spend that money on heroin. What difference does that make to them, as long as they get their votes, right? Whereas if you are a charity, then you have to make the determination, like, okay, well, it's going to be this difficult to pay for your rent specifically, instead of handing you money, and they can make that calculation and go, okay, yes, well, that increases the probability that this is going to go to the right place by this much, and figure out whether that's worth it in every given circumstance.
Right, like if I'm paying your phone bill for you, then that gives you the chance to have a phone and have phone service, which then gives you the access to the internet and the ability to get a job. Whereas if I just gave you the $60 or whatever, I mean, I don't think you could buy heroin with $60, but
I think you can.
Get the idea.
Yeah.
Well, you might be able to. I don't know how much heroin costs.
I don't either, but you can get a half of a rock or whatever, and I'm sure they'll figure out how to fill in the gaps if they need to.
But yeah, like that's the whole thing, is like you're giving somebody access to something that can better their lives with a phone bill being paid. Whereas with heroin or something like that, you're just hurting them indirectly.
And maybe someday the government will get around to doing an additional tax program to pay people's phone bills. Whereas if you have private charities competing with each other, then they have the incentive to figure out right away and get on it that, okay, this is one of the ways that we can help people that doesn't get abused.
Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Shortwave Surfer. I appreciate the call. Let's continue here. We have Bad Slave on the line in New Hampshire. Bad Slave, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to just say that, getting into the whole contraband thing is that, right now, it's been a long time since the USA has been the maximum, abuser of incarceration as the choice of taking people's freedom, and the trick that they have is that basically they've written so many laws, particularly in the federal realm, that have there to,
You mean 3 felonies a day so that we can have the most filled prison systems in the entire world?
There are a ton of people behind bars who've never harmed another human being. And I happen to know, Bad Slave, that you spent some time in state prison here in New Hampshire for a victimless act of, I think, driving your car. What was your
horrible criminal?
Your experience behind bars there? What percentage of the people were there that you encountered for actually creating a victim versus those who had no victim?
The best I could, glean from the population I was exposed to is that about half, of the people that are there for
about half,
crimes without a harmed party.
Right. Now, this is state prison. There may or may not be more in places like federal prison, depending on the security level, obviously. But now, state prison, was this considered a maximum security facility? I mean, they don't have different levels of security, I don't think, in New Hampshire.
Well, I was in general population for the 18 months that I was there. And it was, I had a good cellmate and who's I think COVID took him out recently. He was only 50 years old, and
that certainly is important to have somebody that, if you're in a cell with people, to hopefully have somebody that you can get along with. But do you have any recommendations for the caller who was on the line? I mean, I know that may not have been the reason you were calling in, but since you do have some experience, you weren't in federal medium security, but I mean, just generally for somebody who, as he said, may be facing 10 years to life, do you have any advice?
Well, I think you're probably as well suited as anybody to make good time for yourself. I was released on home confinement after the 13 months, and my experience there was not bad. The people were good to me.
Yeah, a lot of it with jail and with prison is really just they make it scarier than it actually is.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for the call, Bad Slave. I appreciate the input there. The number here is 603-283-6160. Coming up, we still haven't talked about the senators taking aim at El Salvador and their Bitcoin adoption. I definitely do want to get into that. So we'll do that on the way in hour 3.
Free Talk Live.
I cannot imagine anyone ever calling a cigarette interdiction hotline.
That'd be great.
What would that conversation be like?
Well, I'm calling because I can't stop smoking.
Sir, do you have a cigarette right now?
Well, yes.
Is it lit?
Uh-huh.
Okay, you have an ashtray?
Yes.
Okay, you know when you're done with your cigarette and you put it out?
Uh-huh.
Okay, try that right now.
But it's not.
Go ahead and do that same motion.
Can you imagine the conversations?
What the hell could they possibly
Is it 24 hours?
I just don't get
Just
it.
someone call him. I can't do it anymore.
It's dumb.
I smoked the whole pack of cigarettes.
I only get motivated at 3 a.m. Help me out. There's nobody there?
I've smoked all my money away, and now my wife's left me, and she took the dog and the kids. I got no money left. I've smoked it all.
I was breaking into my neighbors' houses and pawning their TVs for more cigarettes.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper with the Week in Review. This week, leaders from the G7 countries met in Japan, pushing for new sanctions against Russia to try and end the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement released at the summit in Japan, the leaders pledged to hold the Kremlin and those who assist it to account for the alleged illegal invasion. FSN's Chris Gilbert sent this report from Tokyo.
The message is clear, a renewed demand that Russia unconditionally withdraw all of its forces from Ukraine and end the war, which G7 countries say has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted immense suffering. It's vowing to starve Russia of the resources to continue the invasion, with heightened sanctions targeting machinery and technology Russia needs for the war. On top of this, the G7 plans to continue to dry up Russia's oil and mineral export revenue and restrict the international flow of Russian diamonds. It also aims to further support vulnerable countries which are experiencing food scarcity due to the war. The G7 remains unwaveringly committed to Ukraine and will hold further discussions about the country's needs when President Volodymyr Zelensky joins the talks in person.
Negotiations continued in Washington this week to try and raise the debt ceiling and avoid a potentially catastrophic default at the start of June. President Joe Biden met congressional leaders at the White House for the second time. Both sides reported progress during the course of the week, and the president said he would be cutting his overseas trip short, not visiting Papua New Guinea and Australia as planned, so he could return home quickly after the G7. But by the end of Friday, the Republican team said it was time to hit the pause button as talks came to a standstill. Benji Hire sent this report from Washington.
Real differences remain. We don't have movement yet. The damning quotes coming from a seemingly unproductive meeting between House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and administration officials, whose demands, he says, are unreasonable. President Joe Biden is in Japan attending a G7 meeting, though his team insists it's working hard to find a bipartisan solution to avoid the country careening into a historic first, a potentially catastrophic debt default, if the government fails to increase the borrowing ceiling, a move required to keep paying the nation's bills.
One of the stranger stories of the week came from New York, with Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claiming they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple said that they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in the heart of Manhattan. The police and the city's mayor disputed that timeline. FSN's Sally Patterson sent this report from New York as the news was breaking.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows, and motorbike scooters were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. This week, Montana became the first US state to ban the Chinese-owned app TikTok. That ban comes into effect at the start of next year, but there has been increased scrutiny from authorities around the world concerning the collection of data by TikTok, with fears that that could be passed on to the Chinese government. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports.
It's not a surprise move at all. US authorities have for months been discussing security concerns around the social media platform. On Wednesday, Montana's governor signed the ban into law, the first such state to do so. In a statement, TikTok has responded saying the ban infringes on the First Amendment rights of the people of Montana. The company is expected to challenge the legislation in the courts.
Disney dropped plans this week to relocate staff from California to a new corporate campus in Florida amid a high-stakes feud with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. FSN's Tony Waterman had this report.
This was a nearly $900 million investment for Disney and would have added more than 2,000 jobs in the Sunshine State, most of those employees coming from Southern California. The company is in the midst of laying off 7,000 workers, and just last month it sued DeSantis after the Florida governor stripped Disney of its special self-governing status. Disney claims this was in retaliation to criticism of the state's Don't Say Gay bill. DeSantis says it's about not giving Disney special treatment.
The FAA has issued a reminder that any plane can crash and kill you. Deputy FAA Administrator Serena Grant.
This year, there will be more flights than ever. Any one of them could blow up in the middle of the sky without warning. That's why we're asking all Americans to tell their families that they love them before taking off.
The agency also released a list of important questions to ask yourself or your seatmate during your flight, including, should the wing be doing that? What is that whirring noise? And do all planes shake this much? They're reminding passengers that even the smallest amount of turbulence could mean you're headed toward a sudden explosive death. While hurtling through the sky at unimaginable speeds in a steel coffin can feel like gambling with your life, the FAA says there are ways to regain the illusion of control.
If you're worried about crashing, why not switch your flight at the last second? It might just save your life. Or kill you, depending on which plane crashes.
And for those who aren't flying this holiday, the FAA has reminded everyone that a plane could fall out of the sky right on top of you at any moment.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, live Saturday show. Phones are open if you want to join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160.
Isn't it weird how a telephone number is referred to as a singular when it's actually plural? There are numbers in a telephone number.
There are numbers, but there are numbers in a number.
Another good point. All right. Very persuasive. The number is 603-283-6160.
Did I hear an S at the end? The
Just
numbers.
dial them in the right order. That's all you got to do, and then you'll get in touch with us. Also, our SIP line, which somebody actually used in the last hour, over at sip.freetalklive.com. We're going to get into the story, Pecos Mountaineer, that you wanted to share with us about the senators in the U.S. apparently doing something to target El Salvador over their Bitcoin support. But first, let's talk to Ricky. He's in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ricky, you're on Free Talk Live.
Thank you there, Brother Ian. brother Captain Peakless Mountaineer. Good evening.
What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I wanted to make a brief statement. Then it's going to be my Beard Talk Live experience. But now on
No, sir. The Beard Talk Live is an hour and a half from now. Yeah. It may seem like Beard Talk Live because there are indeed men with beards.
No, I'm just going to talk about Beard Talk Live.
Oh, that's fine. Just for our listeners that don't know, that is coming up at 10:30 Eastern Time tonight. It is a not on the radio show. It's internet only. You can find it over at watch.freetalklive.com, which means there's no FCC to get in the way of the conversation. All right, Ricky.
For my part, how dare you make people aware of our other show?
Go ahead. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, on to that statement quick. Okay. The situation loves Ricky from the Commonwealth, the Confederate Democrat, even if he's a conservative as all hell, brother. It's all good, you know. Now on to, if I could, my topic.
Can you guys get a room, maybe on like our chat server at chat.freetalklive.com?
Well, I'm not going to be online until like the beginning of next month.
Okay, well, you guys should get a room. I mean, it sounds like a love fest here. What else did you call? What did you actually call about?
So. No. I'm just being Ricky from the Commonwealth, as I've known.
Ricky does want to do porn.
He's too conservative.
That's
for
true.
Me now.
Really?
Yeah, you should listen to the first time he called our show.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, there are people that are into like, you know, different deformities and cripples and things like that.
And of course, for cost savings,
like tracheostomies.
Of course, for cost savings, Ricky will star in the films himself.
I could say what it's like having a conversation with the situation, me being the liberal Confederate Democrat and he being what he is, but I can't say it on the air on this program.
Okay, that's fine. So what were you calling about, Ricky, besides the situation?
Well, I just wanted to say this one, you know. Initially, when I mentioned about going on Beard Talk Live, I was a little apprehensive, you know, but I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know if you heard when I was on last Saturday night.
I didn't.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Was it, though?
The
captain's laughing about that comment, so I don't know if everyone agrees.
What's that?
I don't know if everyone agrees, but that was the conversation where he said he wanted to do porn?
That wasn't last
time. No, that was the time before.
That was all different.
A couple times ago.
No, it was kind of weird. Well, that's what I want to talk about. And this is kind of for the captain, too. You know, I'm a flexible guy. And I mean, I basically came off like I did on the underground groups on Skype back in 2017. And,
there's probably a fetish for that, a blind, flexible guy. I think you could make it in porn, Ricky.
Please don't keep redirecting him to that avenue. Ricky,
here's what I was going to say.
Well, okay.
What I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. I mean, it was good. I had a good night. You know, Captain had me on like 3 times. He put me on hold. I was pretty hot that night. You know,
well, if Captain keeps bringing you back, I mean, that may be an indicator that he's enjoying your presence. I don't know.
Could be an indicator that we need more callers, too.
Yeah, but you don't need them, Ricky. I mean, you could just...
Well, here's what
we have a lot of fun on that show, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right, so Ricky, you're giving it a good review. That's what you're calling in to do here tonight. Thank you for the call. Thank you for the call tonight. I appreciate it. Good. I also like Beard Talk.
We'll talk to him later.
Yeah. You can call in later tonight. The same number, by the way, so you can call in the same number. Just after 10:30 Eastern Time, and then the rules are all different.
That's right.
On Beard Talk Live.
Yeah, I don't really follow. We're sort of format.
Right.
We even forget our own shtick sometimes.
Yeah, it is almost impossible to keep to any sort of a plan on that show, which is a lot of fun.
That's okay. All right, so
it's anarchy.
Let's get into it here, Peakless Mountaineer. You wanted to bring up El Salvador. This is the country that made headlines in, I think it was September of 2021, when they adopted a legal tender status for Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin, not necessarily other cryptocurrencies. And they also only have the dollar prior to that. So they don't have their own central bank currency at this point. They did at one point in the past. Yeah. They scrapped that.
And since you mentioned other cryptocurrencies, he has the guy who runs the country has come out and said that, all of those are securities. So he agrees with Gary Gensler on that. No, those are all unregistered securities. Whereas the one that I like...
He's a dictator, by the way, this guy. This guy is, his name is Nayib Bukele.
He's my favorite dictator.
There's not really a lot to like about
him. But still.
You have a list of favorite dictators?
It's a list of one so far.
Okay,
hey,
but
if more dictators want to start embracing Bitcoin, then they can compete with Nayib Bukele for my favorite dictator status.
he does try to, portray himself as this cool guy. He wears his hat backwards.
Is he trying to be a crypto bro?
Oh, totally.
Does he drive a Lambo?
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know what he drives. But anyway, what's going on with regards to El Salvador? Because so far, the experiment hasn't really been a resounding success of Bitcoin in El Salvador. No, I'm not kidding you.
Are you kidding me? Dude, the murder rate's gone down by 98%.
That has nothing to do with Bitcoin.
That has everything to do with Bitcoin.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, absolutely.
That has to do with them rounding up thousands, if not tens of thousands of people and holding them with no trial in a terrorism facility prison.
Look, I'm not saying that didn't contribute to this, but the biggest thing that comes down to with crime is, do you have something better to do? So if you are economically successful as a country, then your people have better things to do than just steal stuff. Now, with
There's
Bitcoin,
not a lot of people using Bitcoin in El Salvador.
Oh, that's completely beside the point. The fact is that this has generated a huge tourism industry for him. So an incredible amount of money is coming into the country because of all of the people who are interested in Bitcoin. So now they have they're setting up Bitcoin miners on this volcano. They're putting together the financial infrastructure to
Didn't we have
incorporate
a guy on the news? Didn't he go to El Salvador?
I think he did. Also, we talked to Mark Falzon.
Oh, that's right.
Who spent a lot of time in there. In fact, he's been doing videos recently, kind of follow-up videos. So he went to El Salvador when it first started. He was there when, on the day that it went into effect, and was trying out the government wallet, which is terrible, called the Chivo wallet.
Yeah.
And then he went back fairly recently and did follow-up interviews, just talking to kind of man on the street, asking people, what their experience has been. There really wasn't a lot of it didn't seem like it had much of an impact at all on the average people there in El Salvador. And I don't deny there are Bitcoin bros or whatever that are going down there. They're vacationing there.
Tremendous
Crypto
amount
tourists.
of money.
I don't know how much money it is, so I haven't heard anything about that.
You should look into it. There's a tremendous amount of tourism that's being generated because of the Bitcoin
Okay,
thing.
so the tourist traps are doing better, but the rest of the country just as screwed as
well,
always.
so that's the thing. If you increase the tourism of a country, you increase the overall wealth of the country. And if you have a country that is doing well economically, then it brings crime way down.
And I don't want to overlook the generational impact, right? So if you have kids right now that are under 5, right, who've never touched a computer perhaps or a cell phone, when they get to 18, right, cryptocurrency is going to mean more to them than it does to adults currently. So El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as a currency probably not going to have a lot of impact on the existing adults except for early adopters and techies.
And that's true. And
we see everywhere else. But the impact it's going to have on the children who are growing up with it, I think, will be far more impactful.
I think that's true, and you can kind of see that in Mark Falzon's recent documentary. I didn't watch the full-length one, but he put out a follow-up one where he's just interviewing a lot of people on the streets. It is definitely the younger people who, younger males, of course, who are interested in cryptocurrency. They had positive things to say. Anyone who was over the age of 35 to 40 just was not interested at all. And
all you Gen Xers, the analogy here is it's like video games. Right? Your parents didn't have them, but you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very much along that line. And look, I'm not arguing that he's not a dictator.
Oh, he's terrible.
But Africa's full of dictators, not one of them increasing the economic well-being of their people. This dictator is increasing the economic well-being of his people and is proving that a country can recognize cryptocurrency, which I think is, and that risk is something that is incredibly important.
I love the
use case history.
I love the use case example. Right?
I don't like that it is a mandatory thing the way the law is written. It is not being enforced.
Not libertarian.
No, of course not. Yeah. It's not being enforced as a mandatory aspect, but it is written that way. So if they wanted to enforce it that way, they could. That's not how it's been done, and I mean, good for them for not doing that.
And that's what legal tender is. I mean, we don't think about it because no one ever does it. But if someone owes you and you cannot refuse dollars. You will go
That's
to
right.
jail if you refuse dollars for a debt that someone owes you.
Correct.
But we don't think about that, but that's what legal tender means.
In the case in El Salvador, as I understand it, the way the law is written, and I had seen the translation of it at the time, was that you must accept it at a business period. I don't think it was just for debt. I think it was just... That's the American legal tender version. There, it's like if you're in business, you have to accept it, although Bukele has said publicly that that won't be enforced. It hasn't been enforced. So if you're an old guy and you don't even have a smartphone and you just like, screw this Bitcoin, I don't care about it, they're not going to throw you in prison. However, if somebody snitches on you in El Salvador, as we reported a couple weeks ago, and they say that you have something to do with gang activity, then good luck to you, because they will snatch you up and they will put you in a maximum security, overcrowded terrorism facility.
So some other gang is going to come in and snatch you up.
The El Salvador gang, the criminal gang that runs the so-called government. They will put you in this place that they just built, this brand new facility, which can house like 40,000 people. There's crazy propaganda style videos out there, like with Hollywood level production, nice editing, nice camera work, really intense music promoting this. These are people who are being locked up with no trial. These are suspects. Yeah. And Bukele has said publicly that he intends to just keep these guys in prison. Just on the say-so of somebody who picked up a phone and said, oh, yeah, I got a tip that so-and-so's involved in gang activity.
Call our snitch line. Yeah. Operators are standing by.
So I hope that the Bitcoin bros don't get caught up in quote-unquote gang activity or cross the wrong bureaucrat, because then they could end up in there. I don't know.
You know who else had a snitch line recently? The United States during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They probably still do.
Federal government set up a hotline for you to call.
Yeah,
so you could snitch out people who weren't masking or social distancing appropriately.
So I mean,
and I think it's very telling that all of the heat that they're taking is over the Bitcoin thing. So like the IMF, they're like, oh, you're a huge risk. We won't give you the category of that will allow anyone to loan you any money. Which, I mean, everything on Earth when it comes to money runs on debt. It is all debt powered. So they're trying to sink them, not because they're being a cruel dictatorial power.
That's right.
No.
Because of Bitcoin.
Right.
And that is the most interesting aspect of what he's doing, Bukele, and what makes it worth looking at is to see what is the world governmental system, the banking system, the central bankers, the IMF types, what is their response to him? How is he dealing with that? So far, his attitude is to basically flip the bird, give him the old double bird and say, screw you, we're doing fine, we don't need you, IMF. That's essentially been his attitude about that. And to that extent, he is likable from that aspect.
Well, and I mean, when you see them saying, oh, there's no way that he's going to be able to pay all of his debt, all of these debts that are coming in at this time, and that's just all over the place. And then he pays them, and that is nowhere. It is just crickets as soon as he actually shows, no, all of the things I'm doing are actually very fiscally responsible. This is actually not a disastrous policy like you're making it out to be. And it's not like he's completely replacing the dollar that runs the country with Bitcoin, which would be dangerous. Like a sudden replacement like that would actually be a chaotic shift. But no, they're trying to fear, uncertainty, and doubt every possible change.
Yep, he is paving the way for other countries to follow suit. Other smaller countries likely are probably considering doing something similar to help themselves and their people potentially gather more wealth for themselves. So.
Meanwhile, in the land of the fee and the home of the slave, cryptocurrency is highly persecuted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, they're targeting apparently El Salvador now. We're going to talk about that coming up here in a moment, but let's go to the phones here and talk to this caller. Caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Bonnie.
Bonnie, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to find out more about this New Hampshire thing.
Okay, what about the New Hampshire thing? What have you heard about it?
Who would you talk to about it?
Well, what is it that you're referring to?
Moving living there.
Oh, okay. Well, I would only talk to libertarians. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that. I've heard it said, but I don't know anything about it.
All right. Where are you calling us from tonight, Bonnie?
Virginia.
Virginia. Now, how would you describe yourself politically?
Well, I vote for Trump.
Vote for Trump. Okay. And why did you vote for Trump?
Because he makes sense.
Makes sense.
He has common sense.
Common sense. All right. So there weren't any particular policy positions or anything like that that you were excited about?
Just a lot of different things. He does things with common sense. He wants to do the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that no other politician was willing to offer because that's part of their scam, that he's like, well, but people really like X, Y, and Z, and none of you are going to seriously offer to do these things? Like, it's not that hard to talk to Russia and make peace. But they all work for the military-industrial complex. So
when you try to talk to them, they just get mad.
Yeah.
Let me give you a quick litmus test here, Bonnie. How do you feel about ending the war on drugs?
I like to stop it because I don't use drugs. My kids don't use drugs. None of that, and I don't want it around me.
Okay, when you say you'd like to stop it, were you saying you want to stop people from using drugs, or you want to stop the war on drugs?
Stop them from being in this country.
Stop them from
But
so throw drug
probably
users out of the.
happen.
You want to throw drug users out of the country?
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
just want to
throw-
tell you, Bonnie,
well,
you don't belong in
throw
New
drug
Hampshire. I'm just going to go ahead and make that judgment here that you should stay in Virginia, and you and anyone who believes like you that drug users should be thrown out of the country, you should stay right where you are. And if you're in New Hampshire already, you should plan to leave. Go ahead and move to Virginia, move to Texas. It sounds like you belong in a conservative state.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So no, New Hampshire is the libertarian homeland. It's the libertarian state.
And on the subject, as a libertarian, I'd like to ask you about this. So where were you with the? Where did you stand on the whole vaccination thing?
I didn't get the vaccination. I didn't trust it.
Well, so here's my perspective.
I agree with
that.
you on that
Yeah,
one.
absolutely. So from my perspective, I'm the one that should make all of my medical decisions.
Right.
Okay.
Mine.
So what if my medical decision is to smoke cannabis?
No, I don't want to. I never have and never want to.
And that's great for you. I think that you should make your decisions. And like, if for some weird reason some politicians like, I want to force everyone named Bonnie to smoke cannabis on Thursdays, I'd be against that. You know, if someone wanted to tell you, here's what you have to put into your body. And in the same way,
crazy.
Right. So now, in the same way that I get to decide whether or not this injection goes into me of this, unknown substance, why shouldn't I also decide which drugs to use?
Right. That's right. I have that right to decide for myself.
Well, then why don't drug users have the right to decide for themselves?
Well, I'm sure they do, but I just wonder if they really realize what they're doing.
See, now that is where I think we'd agree, where I think that it's really important that if people make these decisions, that they are fully educated on what the effects of their choices are to the best knowledge that we have available.
Yeah.
Very persuasive, Peakless Mountaineer. I think you make a great point. Does that change your mind, though, Bonnie, about wanting to throw drug users out of the country?
Well, I can't say throw the drug users out, but throw the dealers out.
Throw the dealers out.
The ones bringing it into the country.
Like the CIA?
Make it illegal.
Well, so here's my issue with that, because all of the doctors, at least the ones that were getting on TV, like they were all saying, "Oh no, you need to put this injection in you." So I mean,
well, I don't want to, and I'm not going to.
Right, and from my perspective, those guys are just another kind of drug dealer. And and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have the option if that's what you want to do, but for me, I want to go to where I get my medicine, and so where I get my medicine might not be someone with a lab coat, might not be someone who graduated from all of these expensive government schools, but it's still where I get my medicine. Shouldn't I be able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, but just a moment ago,
but that might be what you call a drug dealer.
Well, that's a little bit different. That should be a control thing.
Yeah. Yep, you definitely don't belong in New Hampshire. Thank you for the call tonight, Bonnie. I definitely appreciate hearing from you. The number is 603-283-6160. Freedom just isn't right for everybody, and that's okay. You know, those people just need to stay right where they are. 603-283-6160. If you do believe in liberty and you understand human rights and freedoms, then you ought to look into the Free State Project. We got more coming up.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper with the Week in Review. This week, leaders from the G7 countries met in Japan, pushing for new sanctions against Russia to try and end the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement released at the summit in Japan, the leaders pledged to hold the Kremlin and those who assist it to account for the alleged illegal invasion. FSN's Chris Gilbert sent this report from Tokyo.
The message is clear, a renewed demand that Russia unconditionally withdraw all of its forces from Ukraine and end the war, which G7 countries say has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted immense suffering. It's vowing to starve Russia of the resources to continue the invasion, with heightened sanctions targeting machinery and technology Russia needs for the war. On top of this, the G7 plans to continue to dry up Russia's oil and mineral export revenue and restrict the international flow of Russian diamonds.
Negotiations continued in Washington this week to try and raise the debt ceiling and avoid a potentially catastrophic default at the start of June. President Joe Biden met congressional leaders at the White House for the second time. Both sides reported progress during the course of the week, and the president said he would be cutting his overseas trip short so he could return home quickly after the G7. But by the end of Friday, the Republican team said it was time to hit the pause button as talks came to a standstill. Benji Hire sent this report from Washington.
Real differences remain. We don't have movement yet. The damning quotes coming from a seemingly unproductive meeting between House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and administration officials. President Joe Biden is in Japan attending a G7 meeting, though his team insists it's working hard to find a bipartisan solution to avoid the country careening into a historic first, a potentially catastrophic debt default, if the government fails to increase the borrowing ceiling, a move required to keep paying the nation's bills.
One of the stranger stories of the week came from New York, with Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claiming they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple said that they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in the heart of Manhattan. The police and the city's mayor disputed that timeline. FSN Sally Patterson sent this report from New York as the news was breaking.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows, and motorbike scooters were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Is Free Talk Live phones open? You can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian, Biggless Mountaineer, and the Captain. I want to say thank you to Free Talk Live supporters of the AMPS program, like Michael Lamau.
Thank you.
Platinum level supporter here on Free Talk Live, and Michael. Oh, that may be a letter I. Michael Imau, which I'm still probably butchering his last name, but thank you, Michael.
Imau, like I ate a bunch of food.
You know who you are. No, spelled differently.
Oh.
But he's a platinum level, which means he's doing $25 a month. That's five times what we ask. We only ask for $5 a month. So big thanks to Michael for supporting the AMPS program at amps.freetalklive.com. Advertise, market, promote, and support. It's a way for you to get behind the show directly to help us continue to get the word out about the ideas of freedom, liberty, cryptocurrency, the stuff that we talk about here, independence, on a regular basis. We're going to get back into the story about El Salvador in a moment here, but if you want to join AMPS, as Michael has done, just go to amps.freetalklive.com. That takes you right over to our Patreon, and that is it's easy to join. Credit card, debit card, even PayPal over at amps.freetalklive.com. You get perks like access to the AMP-only podcast that has the full radio show every night without any recorded ads. Let's go to the phones here. We got Sarah on the line in New Mexico. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, so according to the Indian Sanskrit, like if you are close to being ascended, that you'll be reincarnated into a family that's very religious. So I kind of think that was kind of true in my case, because my father was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, and all of my family was like deacons or elders, all in the family, even though it was Presbyterian.
I'm offended.
I was born to a religious family.
What are you offended about?
That Sarah called.
No, I have a feeling that if that's true,
that's actually not what Hindu dictates. I mean, it can be that you get reincarnated in a religious family, but leaving the wheel of samsara is available to everyone at any time.
What is the wheel of samsara?
Reincarnation. So in the karmic cycle, so you wrong others and then you must pay off your karmic debt.
Mm-hmm.
And while that is true, the possibility of enlightenment exists for everyone at all times. And
the thing is that, if you have good karma, if you're born into you'll be born into a beautiful body in a wealthy family, that's considered a good karma. And even your astrological sign is part of your karma. So remember, in the ancient times, that people that were wealthy, they felt like it was a good fortune. In Europe also, in different religions, they consider that. And
but there's plenty of pretty people out there and wealthy people who seem to absolutely have dreadful lives, who seem to hate their existence. Is the idea that they had good karma in the past, so they got a really hot body and a nice, rich family, and just to see if they could, still have good karma? Because it seems like a lot of them are blowing it.
And that basically is the idea, is that you have good karma, you get an easier existence, and then with that easier existence, you sin, basically. And then you have to reincarnate in a rougher existence to work off some of that karma. And then you have and it just sort of goes round and round. and that's actually why Buddhism's primary focus is all on the sudden enlightenment, because that way you don't have to just go reincarnation to reincarnation to reincarnation, but Zen Buddhism especially focuses on the possibility of an immediate liberation from the wheel of reincarnation.
Sarah, thanks for the call tonight. The number here is 603-283-6160. I think karma's an interesting subject. Glad she brought it up. Let's get back into El Salvador, however, where they, in 2021, in September, essentially made Bitcoin legal tender. And now it's not quite about a year and a half later. At this point, it hasn't really been taking El Salvador by storm as far as the average person goes. But as Peakless pointed out, there has been some additional tourism money coming in. There are some big plans to create this Bitcoin city concept, and that's kind of interesting. Unfortunately, it means if you want to invest in it, you'd be giving money to the same evil folks who are putting innocent people behind bars for just simply accusing them of being involved in gang activity. So you're not going to be moving to some sort of libertarian utopia or anything like that, or anything even close to it.
But you can spend your Bitcoin.
In theory.
In terms of timing, I'd hasten to point out that there seems to be a 4-year cycle on the dollar value of cryptocurrencies. So it may be a little too soon to tell on what the effect of moving to Bitcoin legal tender status is.
It's definitely too soon to tell.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas as these 4-year cycles go through, so far we keep hitting new all-time highs. And every time that happens, I think it's going to give other countries the question of whether they should institute this policy.
Definitely.
And of course, the worse off your country is, the more it would benefit.
But there are these other forces in the world, like the IMF and the other central banks in the world, that are definitely against cryptocurrency. They want to have total control over the money supplies, and crypto is an enemy to those people. So, this is part of what's the interesting thing about what El Salvador has done, is what are the reactions of the rest of the world, and how's El Salvador handling that? So you've got some news.
Yeah, two such enemies are Bob Menendez, the Democrat from New Jersey, and Jim Risch, the Republican from Idaho, the chairman and ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, respectively. They announced legislation called the Accountability for Cryptocurrency in El Salvador Act on Friday. The legislation was previously introduced and passed out of committee last year. The legislation specifically mandates that the State Department produce a report spelling out the risks for cybersecurity, economic stability, and democratic governance.
I think I read this now that you're reading it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and as it pointed out, it has been this has been brought up before. So yeah, you do have a lot of these political opponents. I mean, like I was saying earlier, they had their rating for credit reduced by the Bank of International Settlements because, oh no, it's too risky. You accept Bitcoin. I mean, you're still using the world's reserve currency as your 99% of your economy. But no, this is too risky.
Right. So to be clear, some United States political people, senators, have written some legislation that says we need to produce data and documentation on El Salvador's usage of Bitcoin.
But no. It sounded to me like they wanted a report on why El Salvador accepting Bitcoin is bad.
Right. Yeah. Spelling out the risks for cybersecurity, economic stability, and democratic governance in El Salvador. Because, El Salvador up until now has had this great democratic governance. Nothing, dictatorial or anything at all.
I want to address this right now because that is very similar to what RFK, the guy who's going to speak at PorcFest.
Robert Kennedy.
Yeah. He says that cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically, is an experiment in democracy. No, it isn't. It is a fact. It is a mechanism of anarchy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Although, weirdly enough, what they call democracy tends to be a lot more like anarchy than anything else. Democrats.
Oh.
Well, and to a large extent, Americans. So, like, when they say liberty and democracy, they actually aren't talking about the tyranny of the majority, which is what democracy ultimately is.
Right.
Well, when RFK said that, and I got to give him credit, he's pandering to the Bitcoiners, and he probably sees it as a source of potential political donations, right? Because he's going to be different from Biden on this particular point. So whether he really means it or not, who knows? He's a politician. But that said, I think it's what he's talking about are important talking points to help bring people who are on the left on board with accepting the idea of Bitcoin. And I think it just depends on who you're talking to, right? How you couch the message. And this is something that good libertarians know how to do. If you're talking to somebody on the right, you change the message a little bit to try to appeal to them. If you're talking to somebody on the left, you do the same thing. So people on the left, they like the idea of democracy, and there are a lot of examples of democratic decisions being made. They're not forceful democracy. It's not, you don't have a gun to your head when it comes to cryptocurrency. Sure. But if you join a decentralized autonomous organization, you are in many cases joining something that is democratically voting on doing various different things. There are multiple votes. In fact, there's votes all the time in these DAOs.
However, Bitcoin is an anarchic infrastructure.
Right. Well, so if you ask an American in general, and especially a Democrat, what democracy is, they're far more likely to come back with something like, well, it's the power of the people, right?
Yes.
Some patriotic sounding.
Right, exactly. Well, and no, I mean very specifically, it's like Demokratos, like demo, like the people, kratos, strength. Now, what democracy is supposed to be is that the people have the power, and not like a wealthy group or a particular person, but that the power is distributed. Now, with Bitcoin, with cryptocurrencies, usually the power is very much distributed, and the thing about
as it should be.
Right, exactly, and so from that perspective,
to the individual, not to the collective.
Right. Well, and the Bitcoin is very much an experiment in what happens when you actually empower the people instead of those who are already corrupt.
Oh, yeah,
and
certainly.
in leadership.
Bitcoin is people's money versus the dollar, which is government's
Which is why
money.
if you're talking to a Democrat and you want them to understand Bitcoin, you put it in the terms of empowering the people rather than the individual, even though we know that it's true that it empowers the individual.
One of the things I don't like about politics is the gerrymandering of language, right? Not calling things what they are.
But it's true.
National parks are not national parks. They're government
I get
parks.
what you're saying, but this isn't some sort of we're not putting in obscurity here. It's true to say that cryptocurrency empowers the people. The people who choose to use cryptocurrency
How does that make it democratic?
Are empowered. I didn't say it makes it democratic.
Okay,
I don't agree with
the
that.
quote is from RFK that Bitcoin is an experiment in democracy.
Well, that is what they call. That is what they.
I'm just saying he's
democracy,
wrong. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I agree.
Bitcoin, he may be wrong about, but there are a lot of democratic aspects to cryptocurrency.
Sure. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
To call the people being the powerful democracy is inaccurate. I agree. But that's what he's talking about. And the thing about communication is its purpose is to communicate. So if this is what communicates with them, even though they're using the word wrong, I mean, it's still effective. Like it absolutely gets my goat when people use the word literally incorrectly.
It literally gets your goat?
It figuratively gets my goat. But I got
to keep you on your hooves there.
Thanks. But I get the idea that there are some people where that is simply going to be the most effective way is if you throw literally in, even if you're using it incorrectly.
All right, so what else are these senators planning on doing? Is that all? Is it just we want to report? We want you to write up an essay, or well, it won't be an essay, it'll be thousands of pages or hundreds or whatever, on how terrible Bitcoin is and how it's empowering the evil government of El Salvador.
Yeah, they want ammunition for their further oppression
terrorism,
of all things,
drug dealing. You know, they're to trot out the usual nonsense and claim that El Salvador is making these things worse.
Yep,
right? That's what they want to do.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the long and the short of it, as they put it. Using cryptocurrency as legal tender could weaken economic and financial stability and empower malign actors.
It can weaken the financial stability of the state.
Yes, that's what they mean.
But not the people.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's the words between the lines there.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all a rush of propaganda. Oh, giving U.S. interest in prosperity and transparency in Central America. Yeah, that's what the U.S. is interested in Central America.
When somebody mentions the United States to me, I think, wow, those guys are really interested in transparency,
and prosperity,
particularly of foreign countries.
Wow.
Yeah, so
hogwash.
Yeah, we need to be sure of how this is going to affect El Salvador. It's like, okay, that's impossible. You can't know.
Well,
this
how about
is an
El
experiment.
Salvador
We're running
gets,
it now.
Yeah, how about El Salvador gets to decide that for themselves?
Yeah.
Right? And what are they going to do? I mean, I guess they could send the CIA in to try to take out Bukele or something like that.
And so that's what this is really going to lead to, is they're going to spend a whole bunch of American tax dollars trying to find ways to attack Nayib Bukele and his decision to make Bitcoin legal tender. And whichever way they find that they're like, oh, we can use this for the propaganda, then that's going to be the way that they attack it.
Speaking of these types, I've actually got a video that I think ties in here. This is of a U.S. representative named Brad Sherman, where he ties Bitcoin in with Bitcoin mining or whatever, in with cocaine production, drug dealing, organ harvesting. So this is, the propaganda against cryptocurrency continues here. This is him being interviewed on looks like CNBC.
There's this fear of missing out, that we've got to keep up with other countries. Peru is way ahead of us in cocaine production. China's way ahead of us in organ harvesting. We don't need to keep up on those things, and we don't need to keep up on crypto.
So this is him explaining why it's okay to crack down on the cryptocurrency industry, because he likens cryptocurrency to other dangerous things like cocaine production.
Well, and if you think about it, he's right, because cocaine production is all run by U.S. dollars. Cocaine is purchased with U.S. dollars throughout the world. Those organs that they harvest and sell on the black market throughout the world, you know what they're most likely to pay for those with? U.S. dollars.
Right.
How does that make him right?
Oh, because you don't need to keep up with those countries because you're way ahead of them. You're the one fueling all of those activities today.
Every bad thing that politicians, and notice it's only the politicians who are saying bad things about cryptocurrency, by the way.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, there's people who don't understand it. But,
okay, yeah. But and if they don't understand it, then they're just regurgitating whatever they heard on TV.
Right.
Likely from the politicians.
Yeah.
So I had a point and I lost it.
People regurgitating politicians.
People regurgitating politicians.
Yeah, it sucks. All right, here's some more of this guy regurgitating.
As for protecting U.S. investors know, and they certainly know now, that when you send your money to the Bahamas or Cayman Islands, you do not have protection. You could lose it all. And
God. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that if I invest in something, I could lose it all? Huh.
You mean there's risk?
I remember what
in
my
order
point
to
was.
Get a reward? Huh.
My point was every bad thing that the politicians say about cryptocurrency is true at least tenfold of the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that they're like, oh, well, you're getting around our sanctions on Russia. It's like, okay, you think no one's getting around your sanctions using dollars? Do you really think that's not happening?
All the shady backroom favoritism that occurs in politics, you think that's done using cryptocurrency? No. No.
Yeah, you've had sanctions against Iran for how long? You think no one's using dollars with the Iranian government? Is that really what you think?
All of the murder that the empire creates, funded by U.S. dollars. That's right.
The idea that we should tell investors that something's licensed in the United States when it's not only as dangerous for the investors as crypto is, but as harmful to our country as crypto tries to be.
Harmful to our country.
Yeah, because I was sitting down with Bitcoin the other day, and it was saying, Captain, I'm really trying to harm the United States. It's such a tough road to hoe. I don't know how I can be more harmful than I currently am.
Now, this is one of those areas where, the words that are being used are actually obscuring what he's really saying, meaning that when he says harmful to our country, he doesn't mean that Bitcoin is harming the land. He doesn't mean that the Bitcoin is harming the forests. He doesn't mean that Bitcoin is harming the people, even. Country means the state.
Yes.
And Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is absolutely a threat to the power of the state.
Yes,
so when people like this talk about the public or the country, that's what they mean.
Well, and it doesn't even have to harm the empire, except that they absolutely refuse to get with it. Because here's the thing. If they wanted to, there are ways that you could maintain the US dollar, maybe not as the savings mechanism of the world, but still as the effective currency of the planet. But you would have to give up some of your power in order to do that. And they're unwilling to do that. So if you want to talk about how cryptocurrency is harming the United States, well, it's because the new technology is leaving. And the reason the new technology is leaving the country is because you refuse to say, here is what's allowed.
Right.
Nothing is allowed. Everything is being prosecuted in a completely unpredictable way, so it's just going everywhere else in the world.
But that's not crypto's fault. That's this man's fault. And the people like him who are continuing. That's what he's justifying here. He's justifying the continuing crackdown by the SEC, the CFTC, the FBI, and you name it.
I don't see a reason to do that.
Okay, but there still is within the subcommittee that you sit on an effort to set some kind of guardrails, regulatory boundaries here. I know that there will be a hearing tomorrow with the digital asset subcommittees of both the Financial Services Committee as well as the Agriculture Committee in the House. Really what that comes down to is SEC versus CFTC jurisdiction. I know where you come down on that. You'd like to see more control with the SEC, but I thought we were all agreed that Bitcoin isn't a security.
No one is convinced of that. I think the vast
Gary
majority.
Gensler has said that.
Gary has said that the vast majority of tokens are securities, and if the industry wants, if they want to know what the rules are, fine. All they have to do is come to Congress and say, "Please make us a security," and we will do that.
Oh, gee, if only there was someone who was not suing you for exactly that. Right. Like, seriously, the SEC is currently being sued by Coinbase because of their absolute refusal to provide any clarity whatsoever. You are literally in a lawsuit right now because what you're telling is a lie.
Oh, no, you just have to come to Congress and just talk to them, and then they'll go ahead and carve this out.
Let Congress decide what your invention is?
Yeah.
Cryptocurrency is a whole bunch of things, and government representatives do not understand the full breadth of what cryptocurrency is. And I think it's freaking hilarious that they are putting together committees and subcommittees and teams of politicians and regulatory commissions and all this kind of to try and we think it and we they don't know. They have no freaking clue.
And he doesn't
and
even
they have
agree.
no business deciding. Government does not decide what things are. Things decide what things are. People decide what things are and how to use them. Congress should have nothing to say about it, period.
Said Sam Bankman-Fried was here doing a host of illegal things for one purpose, and that was to keep the SEC out of crypto. We should not trash Sam Bankman-Fried on the one hand and then pass his bill on the other hand.
Wow.
You say that they should come to Congress to set the rules here, but that has proven quite difficult to do, Congressman. Are you optimistic that we will actually see legislation make its way through your committee and then through its counterpart in the Senate as well? What would that be? We hear often it's stablecoins that are the lowest hanging fruit.
Never going to happen.
I'm optimistic that if this industry wants real regulation, they can get it. But they don't. And they will do everything possible, including everything Sam Bankman-Fried was doing, to stop us from having real regulation of crypto and to prevent the Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering statutes from being effective.
They have bent over backwards trying to get regulated in any kind of consistent way, and it has failed so spectacularly. Like, I mean, you are calling a stablecoin a security. A security requires that you have to try and make it worth more than it is now. A stablecoin requires that you try to make it worth exactly what it is worth now.
Yeah, and he's claiming that the industry, the crypto industry, is somehow stopping them, Congress, from passing laws.
What a powerful industry,
right?
Wow.
Right? And no one believes that Bitcoin is a commodity, really? Gensler does. The guy who ran the SEC before him decided that it was...
The CFTC does.
Right, the CFTC does.
It can't be regulated because it is all of the things. It's a currency, it's a commodity, it's a
free
security,
speech.
it's free speech.
That's what not enough people talk about.
And you can't regulate it.
It is speech plus mathematics.
Yep.
That's it. And we're using it to get out of debt.
All right, more coming up in a half an hour at watch.freetalklive.com. Check these guys out on Beard Talk Live, 10:30 Eastern at watch.freetalklive.com. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow night, freetalklive.com. In the meantime. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest crypto